It was
Like last Wednesday, Tuesday.
We can get started.
Welcome to the February Smithville R2 Board of Education meeting. Go ahead, if you would, please rise. And I'm going to ask Mr. Ian Sexton if he would lead us in the pledge tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ian.
Very welcome.
Okay. Agenda item 7.0, adoption and modification of the agenda. 7.1, does anybody have any issues or changes that need to be made to the agenda? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the agenda as presented. Got a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 7.2. We can get it to advance. Approve executive session meeting minutes for the January 20th, 2021 executive session meeting. Any comments or questions about those meeting minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the executive session meeting minutes for January 20th, 2021.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second to approve the executive session meeting minutes for January 20th, 2021. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 7.3, approve the regular session meeting minutes for January 20th, 2021. Any comments or questions on those meeting minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the regular session meeting minutes for January 20th, 2021.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the regular session meeting minutes for January 20th, 2021. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 7.4, approve the student assessment workshop minutes for February 2nd, 2021. Any questions or comments about those minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the student assessment workshop minutes for February 2nd, 2021.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second to approve the student assessment workshop minutes for February 2nd, 2021. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 8.0 consent agenda items. We've got 3 consent agenda items tonight. 8.1 approved bills for payment. 8.2 February supplemental pay, and 8.3 approved builder's risk insurance. Any questions or comments about the consent agenda items as presented? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the consent agenda items for approval. Got a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items 8.1 through 8.3 as presented. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. Agenda item 9.0, communications. 9.1 is correspondence.
Yes, you have a thank you card from Cassie Lahan. Her father passed, and she is thanking us for the flowers that were sent.
Okay, 9.2, board appreciation.
Yes, this is every year we'd like to take a minute, and this is officially Board Appreciation Week. We'd like to take a minute to let the board know how much we appreciate all of your effort and all of the time that you put into this job. You don't really truly know what it's about and how much time and effort it takes until you get involved. Right, Susan and Scott? So we very, very much appreciate you. You know, the Smithville School District has a strong, strong history of very, very good school board members that are very supportive of our students and of our staff. And so you guys continue that tradition, and you have at your stations tokens of appreciation from the various schools, from the Central Office Administration, and probably some additional things snuck in there as well. So from all of us to all of you, thank you for all of your work.
Okay. Robert, I'm not sure what you unplugged, but we lost the side projectors up here. If that was something to do with Randy's projector. Donna, any way you can advance to 9.3? Well, if we see it on my screen, that's board priorities update 9.3.
Yeah, just a couple of updates here and items that you're familiar with. The finished presentation from our architects for the Activity Center, that document's recently been made available to you, as well as the new recruitment materials. Scott did an excellent job with these materials and will be very helpful as we recruit teachers to the district. So those apply to a couple of your board priorities, and I wanted to point those out this month.
I know one thing that I've seen, these were put out on Twitter, the Activities Center. Coach Ambrosian is very proud of these drawings and diagrams. I hope the finished product is as good as what and I have no doubt that it will be, but he's getting comments and compliments from all across the country for what we're doing for the kids here in this district. So it's kind of neat seeing whether it be college coaches or high school coaches or whoever it is, complimenting, getting things done in this area for the kids. So I'm excited to get ground broke and get construction started on Any other comments or questions on the board priorities update? And we will get construction update here in just a little bit on Eagle Heights. So I think we'll wait on that for that point. 9.4. Assistant Superintendent for Academic Services, Dr. Craddock.
I just have a few things to update the board on. Last month when we met, we shared that we had planned to pursue the Real World Learning Grant through the Kauffman Foundation. I just wanted to let you know that we have submitted the first round of application materials on last Friday and have already been contacted by Kauffman to provide some additional information by next Friday. So things are rolling along there. And again, that funding would help us hire a person who would coordinate career connections, career development, and also real world learning experiences for our students. So very excited to make some progress on that part of our strategic plan. I'll keep you posted on how we're doing with that grant application. And then I have just a few follow-up items from the assessment workshop on February 12th. February 2nd. There were a few questions that you all had that I needed a little time to look up. Scott had asked about an analysis of previous NWA scores for our high school students who did not participate in the testing this past fall. So I took the spreadsheet that is generated from last fall 2019, compared it to our testers from fall 2020. I highlighted anyone who was missing on that 2019 sheet, and then I went into PowerSchool and confirmed the ones who were no longer students and removed those. Then I copied all of the scores from 2019 into a spreadsheet so I could easily look at where kids fell in comparison to the average class score for that testing period, fall 2019. So here are the results. For our current ninth graders, in math, 38 of the students who did not test this past fall in the previous year, 2019, scored at or above average, while 25 of the students who did not test scored below average. So the average score of the 38 who were at or above average was 11 points above the average score of their peers in that testing period. And the average score of the 25 who tested below average in 2019 was 12 points below the average score. So just their 1 point difference in the average. So if we're going to use their past achievement as an indicator of what they would have done this year, we would have had probably a little bit of a higher average score for ninth grade math had everyone tested. In reading, it's much closer. 32 of the students who did not test scored at or above the average in 2019, while 31 students who did not test scored below average. The average score of the 32 who were at or above was 10 points above the average score in 2019, while the average score of the 31 who scored below was 9 points. So again, very, very close. So the information, the average score, if we're going to use this as an indicator that was presented at the workshop, would probably be pretty accurate. For our 10th graders, current 10th graders. In math, there were 23 students who did not test that scored at or above average in fall 2019, while 20 of the students who did not test scored below average. The average score of the 23 that were at or above in 2019 was 17 points above the average score, while the average score of the 20 who scored below was 14 points below the average score. So again, feel that the information that was presented on February 2nd is probably fairly accurate. And then in reading, we had 32 students who did not test that scored at or above average in 2019, while 19 of their peers who did not test scored below average. The average score of the 32 was 13 points above the average score, while the average score of the 19 who scored below was 17 points below the average score. So I actually calculated that one, and there was a 0.1 difference, 0.1 lower than the average when you use that information to compare to the data that was presented on the 2nd. So overall, I think that if we're going to use past performance as an indicator of how the students would have done this year, that the information that was presented on the 2nd is fairly accurate. Ian had asked about the percentage of students who had at least one failing grade at the end of first semester last school year. There were 19% of our high school students who had at least one F at the end of first semester last year, compared to 17% at the end of first semester this year. And I think that speaks to the interventions that have been put in place to help support those students which I know the high school has had planned to do this year, even more of that. So I think that that is a good indicator that those interventions are helpful. And then you also asked Ian about the total number of surveys that were sent to parents in the last round of data collection. 1,375 middle and high school parents received an invitation to complete that survey. That represents 223 parents of virtual students and 1,152 parents of in-person students. 696 parents responded, that's just a little over half, representing 587 in-person students and 109 virtual students. Unless you have any questions for me, that's all I have to share.
Any other comments or questions for Dr. Krause?
Any other comments or questions for Dr. Cradfield? Thank you, Dr. Cradfield. I believe 9.5 construction update. Mr. Hitchcourt.
All right, thanks, Denny. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so February construction update. Again, our projects for our master building plan. Going to start again with Eagle Heights. Of course, we're in the construction phase. We are staying on target for our completion date, which is July. You can see that we're right between the walls and structural steel and finishing our roofing. I do have some pictures. The last time we visited the last board meeting, you could see all the CMU blocks sitting on site. You can see some structural steel starting to be delivered. So you can see now how we have most of the walls up and a lot of the structural steel up. So there's the picture. If you're on the east side of the addition looking back west, there's if you're on the west side looking back east, on the north side, and not sure which side that is, but more of a view from the bottom looking up at the structural steel. So a lot of progress being made at Eagle Heights despite the weather. In all reality, the last week there has not been much activity at the site. You can imagine with the extreme cold and everything else going on, it has pretty much been shut down for the last week. But next Tuesday it should be around 60 degrees. So hopefully we get this snow melted and we'll get people back on track. They were a little bit ahead, so this doesn't really put them behind. It puts them right on. But if we were to have another week of weather like we did, we would start going behind. But right now we are pretty much on track at Eagle Heights. Next, the activity center. I have some new pictures to show. Our board president mentioned a little bit ago about a tweet that went out that had some pictures in there, and I have those pictures in this presentation. This is the picture of the downstairs weight area. In the middle, you have a turf area but used for bounding, mobility exercises, some sprinting, some areas there, all handicap accessible. And then of course, on the outside perimeter, you have all the weight racks around. So definitely, and then of course, on the side near the walls, you have ellipticals for those looking for cardiovascular or doing injury rehab. The next picture is your locker room. Just kind of wanted to show what those lockers would look like. You can see there's a whiteboard there, and players can come into this area, whether it's a soccer game, football game, track event, and a coach can assess with their players. So there's 2 locker rooms, 1 on each side. And then this is the upstairs area. This is the wrestling room. You can see the fans for air circulation, the offices on that side, some mechanical rooms, IT rooms, coach's office, and then the mats as they spread out amongst the area there. So some nice renditions there for you to kind of see what that space will look like. You know, we've spent a lot of time designing these, a lot of time trying to get pricing on this. You know, we'd wish to have the bids on all this in March, in all honesty. We're not going to have those until April. And the reason why is the commodity prices right now are just going crazy. Structural steel can fluctuate 40 cents a foot at any different, sorry, a pound at any different time. And so we are going through our budget with a fine tooth comb to make sure we're where we need to be, because we don't want to go out on bid day and have prices be higher than we think and not have any wiggle room. So that was a concern, and I'd rather spend another month really fine combing our budget, getting the industry leaders like Blue Moon, Midland Steel, some of those folks that have worked in the past to get that specific pricing, to know when we go out to bid, we're going to be in a good spot. And so it's taking a little bit longer to get to that point, but with the circumstances of what we're dealing with the bid market right now, we'd rather be safe than sorry. So that's why we're kind of pushed it back a month to bring that to you guys. So here is the where we're at right now with it. We should have bid packages released here in March, which is coming up, March 11th to be specific. And then we'll have the bids come in, and it'll be look to be on your board agenda in April, so that way you guys can see those. So we look to break ground in May, and then building will be enclosed by October for the cold weather, and then we look to have it complete before next school year ends, so that way we could have a ribbon cutting, let people tour the facility, and go into the summer full steam for that next school year. So we are definitely excited about this project. And then of course we have our other projects that we are looking to do this summer. And so those are still not forgotten, but haven't had any progress on those because they're smaller projects and don't take the capacity that the others do. So be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Hedgecorth on the construction update? Thank you, Robert. I believe 9.6 is our comments from the audience. This is an opportunity for members of the audience to make comments to the board. A total of 20 minutes will be allocated for public comment. Speakers will be heard in the order in which they notified the superintendent of their desire to speak. Individuals addressing the board should state their name, address, and limit their comments to no more than 5 minutes. Items or issues related to specific personnel should not be discussed in open session. Donna, do you have the list as they were presented? Okay. Are we? Welcome. If you could go ahead and just let us know who you are and proceed. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Fales. Good evening. My name is Dalton Haberman. I'm the Assistant Band Director here in the Smithville School District. I've recently become a voting member of this community on 194th Terrace in Diamond Crest. I'd like to thank the school board administration for allocating this time during their meetings. As our district and many others discuss the appropriate time to return to 100% in-person instruction, we must consider a daunting amount of variables, although it seems the discussion of risk mostly centers around the morbid talking point of deaths related to COVID-19. I'm here this evening to shed light on a variable that I feel few are discussing. Last week, a doctor told my wife that she'd been suffering from long COVID. If you're unaware, this condition is essentially the body's immune system being stuck on very long after its fight with COVID-19. Prognosis comes after 6 months of symptoms, ER visits, doctor appointments, and several specialist appointments. Similar to COVID-19, long haulers, or people with long COVID, experience any combination of symptoms from a long list of possible afflictions. For the past 6 months, my wife has been experiencing heart palpitations, extreme fatigue, hair loss, brain fog, extreme insomnia, chest pains, as well as sudden and centralized pains in different places of her body. Alongside the physical symptoms, she also endured the emotional impact of extended illness and not understanding what was wrong with her body. She had difficulty performing the duties of her job, and after regular days of work, she felt as though she had run a double marathon. The small task of browning beef for dinner was simply too exhausting. She could not even find rest for her body or mind because of the insomnia. All of this on top of the financial burden of many doctor and hospital visits. Our first event lasted from 10:30 p.m. till 3 a.m. We went to the hospital down the road. She felt like she had a heart attack or stroke-like symptoms. Because of COVID protocols, I could not be with her in the hospital. I watched from outside as she shook uncontrollably, struggling to remember her own name and her address to check in. Her phone died while she was in there, so I could not communicate with her. We were not covered at this particular hospital. I called the front desk and asked if I could take her somewhere else, knowing that we could not afford this ER bill. That bill ended up being $11,000. In the next 2 weeks, I took my wife back to the ER 3 more times. Similar results. Doctors had nothing to say. All of her blood work was fine. All of the tests were fine. They had no idea what was going on. After seeing a general practitioner, she was given antidepressants, and because she was not clinically depressed, they had adverse effects. It pushed her into hallucinations. She pleaded with her doctor that these pills were not the answer. Something else must be wrong. He prescribed stronger antidepressants. We consulted with cardiologists, neurologists as well. No answers from them. At this point, I must remind you that this was not a couple of days. This was several months of doctor's visits. While my wife struggled to keep up with her job, she couldn't do anything around the house either. One night, she looked at me and said the words, "I would rather die than suffer like this every day for the rest of my life." And I told her not to say things like that, and she says, "No, I mean it." We'd only been married for a couple months, and our marriage was put to the test. Her unrelenting symptoms put her in the constant state of irritability, sadness, and anger. Eventually, her endocrinologist noticed a few vitamin deficiencies. With this information combined with what we could source online, we found some vitamin supplements that could help curb her symptoms. After the most recent visit last week, she told her she had long COVID. Just last week, over 6 months into her symptoms, she was finally prescribed something to help with her sleep. That moderately helps. Doctor also found scarring in her lungs and lymph nodes, and just today told her she had signs of rheumatism. She's still experiencing symptoms today. Most people that experience long COVID are unaware of what they're going through. This was the case with my wife and I for many months. Johns Hopkins University has recently reported 1 in 3 people that contract COVID-19 experience long haul symptoms. As of now, there's no cure or treatment. We have read from other personal accounts that eventually the symptoms lighten and go away. This time frame is anywhere from 6 to 9 months, with some people now entering 12 months of continued symptoms. Nothing is known about how vaccines interact with long haulers. What I have shared has been a partial retelling. Many significant choices in our lives have been forced one way or the other. We skipped Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's with our families. I personally turned down a graduate assistantship at K-State with an esteemed member of my field, which would have been an enormous opportunity in my career path. Our experience is not isolated, it is shared by tens of thousands of people. Going forward, I implore that you consider this information as you make decisions that affect other people's livelihoods. Teachers and staff are stakeholders just as much as students and parents are. I've heard many of my colleagues, both in and out of district, talk about finding other fields of employment. As a teacher, it has been striking to experience being heralded as a hero just 11 months ago, now the enemy in front of children's education. Trust me, the teachers want to have their kids back too. We shouldn't be in a position to sacrifice our health to do so. The disease is not just about living and dying. It is not that simple. It's a highly complex issue with many variables. As I have shared today, there are long-term health impacts to consider. With that, the emotional and financial toll resulting from extended illness. What my wife has gone through has been truly horrible, especially when I can do nothing about. It is my hope that the Smithville School District will not put others in position to experience what my wife has experienced. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Welcome, Dr. Krim.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here this evening. My name is Michael Krim. I live at 720 Northwest 173rd Court in Smithville. I've got 3 children in the school district, and I'd like to just talk a little bit about the school situation and the current coronavirus pandemic. The great worldwide pandemic of 1918 is thought to have killed at least 675,000 Americans in a little over 2 years, and is thought to have originated just over the border here in Kansas. By way of comparison, currently the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation estimates that we will have approximately 615,000 deaths by June 1st in just over 18 months. How is it that only over 100 years on, despite the ventilators, the IV drugs, and the amazing technology that we have, that we're about to eclipse the greatest pandemic in modern history? How is that even possible? And the answer is simple. We have chosen to allow this to happen by placing our own self-interests above the collective good. Indeed, the headline read in November, "Americans have chosen death over deprivation." It was not long after this when we began seeing more than 3,000 Americans die in mass casualty events on a daily basis that would be comparable to mass casualty events over the past 100 years, like 9/11, Pearl Harbor, and D-Day. So we've chosen this, I believe, and it did not have to happen. And by way to support this, I would like to compare how we in America have done with other countries in the world. Currently, our death rate per capita per 100,000 people is 148. In Australia, that number is almost 4. In South Korea, 3. In New Zealand, not even 1. In Taiwan, it's 0.04. So these numbers reveal that America, the greatest country in the world, has done a terrible job with COVID. We have 4% of the population and 20% of the death. The countries that I've listed are democratic, full of free people who freely choose to wear masks and social distance. These countries are not suffering from severe unemployment or economic calamities. Their children may attend school without high risk of infection or the likelihood of spreading it to those who are more vulnerable. These countries chose to follow science first. It was not a matter of political persuasion. They have proven that the scientific cure is far better than the disease itself. By comparison, Americans have collectively chosen to do our very best to go on with business as usual, all the while supposedly protecting the vulnerable. By the way, there was never really a plan to protect the vulnerable. It was just something we said to make ourselves feel better. Of course, the vulnerable have always understood that they were on their own because their behavior has shown them that they were viewed as expendable. In the not so distant future, so many of our vulnerable citizens will have died that it exceeds all of the major American wars of the 20th century. This fact is truly difficult to comprehend. Many people have wanted to protect themselves, but could not because they are either essential workers or simply have had to just try to make a living. The teachers and staff of the Smithville School District deserve better than this. They should not have to work in a dangerous full-time environment without the option of being fully vaccinated first. Even in a low to moderate transmission setting, our school district is unable to provide the necessary social distancing required by the CDC. Currently, the positivity rate and total number of cases in Clay County exceeds the threshold for full in-person learning. In fact, according to the CDC, the recommendation would be for everything to be virtual. Numbers specific to our zip code should not be used as the sample size is too low to reliably power the data. We should note that our school district has done an extraordinary job making hybrid available this entire year, even during times of extraordinarily high transmission. As a school district, we should make cautious decisions based upon the recommendations from our top scientists and epidemiologists, not the self-interest of parents or for political expediency. We need to focus first on saving lives, saving livelihoods, and then educating our children. I would like to thank the school board and the administrators for the wonderful job that I think you've done so far. It's been, I think, a very difficult time for you to operate in a very thankless environment. And I'd also like to thank educators and staff for the support and the wonderful way they've treated our children during this time. And with that, I'll conclude my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Krim.
We have to go in the same order. Everyone wants to switch order. We have to go in the same order. Is that because of the notes? Does it matter? No. You can grab the mic's already on.
Welcome, Ms. Foster.
Hi. My name's Tanya Foster, and I'm here. I have a little bit of something written. I've had a lot of parents reach out to me, but 5 minutes isn't enough to include everything. So I'm going to read one letter from a parent who couldn't be here and then say a little bit about what I have planned to say. I have 3 students that attend Smithville schools, a 7th grader, a junior, and a senior. I've written many letters to the school board and the administration. I provided lots of data and facts as to why I believe students should be attending school 5 days a week in person. I chose to speak tonight not to share facts and statistics, but rather to represent multiple parents in the community and hundreds of Smithville students who feel the need to return in person is of the most importance. And I'm going to read a letter I got from Vicki Clancy. I'm a single mom of 2 kids. My oldest is a junior and my youngest is in 8th grade. My son is self-disciplined, works hard, and takes numerous AP classes and makes great grades. However, he's an introvert. His only source of communication is school, physically going to school. Monday, after school was canceled for weather, he finally admitted to me that he hates virtual days. He just wants to skip Thursday so he could actually go to school. He wants to go to band. He wants to get out of the house. He's bored. He gets all of his work done by noon at the latest. Noon every day. How much is he learning? My daughter has struggled every day since last March. She needs a teacher to teach her. She needs the FaceTime. She needs the social side of school. She needs a routine. She cannot stay focused at home and never has been able to. As we were arguing today about schoolwork and studying, she made a comment, next year will be better because she will be back in school full time with teachers to teach her. She doesn't need to learn to take good notes now. I told her at this rate, she'll not go back to school every day this year, next year, maybe never. She started crying. She yelled no and said, if that happens, I'm screwed. My 13-year-old said this. She feels her future is screwed if she can't go back to school full time. She verbalized what I've been fearful of for over a year. Please listen to your parents. We're not just saying send our kids back because we don't want them at home or because we don't care about a virus. Some of them literally cannot learn at home. Show them the strength and how to overcome fear and give them hope for their future. Like I said, that's Vicki Clancy. Through networking with phone calls, neighborhood groups, and Facebook, parents have formed quite a large group who are passionate about getting the students back to school full time. I would describe this group as a type of support group. It's mostly comprised of women, but there's a few dads, there's grandparents, there's coaches and teachers. There are even members from other communities who can sense the pain our children are feeling. We've gathered support from other communities who've been fortunate enough to see their students at school 5 days a week throughout the school year. When I say I see this as a support group, it's because nearly every day I'll get a message from someone who's hurting, sometimes it's from a parent I know, sometimes it's from someone I've never met. These parents see their kids slowly deteriorating. One mom reached out to tell me her senior has started cutting himself. This is a child who's been involved in varsity sports for the past 2 years. He doesn't even want to finish high school now and has all failing grades. Another senior I can describe was once planning to become a doctor. She's excelled throughout school, is in the top of her class, but as of today hasn't even selected a college. A couple of weeks ago, I received a text message from a good friend. It was screenshots of the conversation she was having with her 12-year-old as her daughter tried to complete hours of homework with no assistance. Their conversation showed me a back and forth anger they were expressing towards one another. Afterwards, that mom reached out to me, sad and upset. She'd been too hard on her daughter. What are we doing to the kids? I heard an administrator on one of the recent board meetings saying that 7th graders need to take their responsibility. Somehow we're forgetting they're 12 years old. Last week when it was announced that our kids would be getting back one Wednesday every other week, I received a text message from my own 12-year-old daughter. She was ecstatic. If only everyone could see inside the homes of these kids. On the outside, they may look fine, and many of them are, but we know depression hides itself in many ways. Recently, one famous social media TikToker who had 1.9 million adoring fans took her own life. Her dad was stunned because he never saw it coming. All the virtual love and attention could save his teen because humans, and adolescents most of all, need human interaction, whether they know it or not. These may be only a couple of Smithville students who are hurting like this, but you can show them that we care. All around the nation, kids have been attending 5 days a week. They've been fine. Every day at St. Teresa's Catholic School here in Kansas City, the administration receives thanks and praise from girls and parents alike. We have so much science and research we can look to. How can we continue to let our kids struggle and hurt like this? One argument I've heard is that there are only 3 months left, so why bother? But those 3 months are all the seniors have left of their school career. Don't they deserve that? I've also heard people say we should praise these kids and tell them their suffering is for the greater good and tell them how much good they're doing for society. First of all, these kids are smart enough to know that this virus doesn't impact them. They know that. Yet they say that they have to sacrifice for what? I don't think we should have to tell the children that they're the heroes. I think we should be able to tell the teachers that they're the heroes. I'm a teacher myself. I'm in the classroom every day, so I feel like I can speak to this. Is there perhaps a risk? Maybe there is, but I don't think we should ask our kids to sacrifice anymore. The science isn't there to support having the schools closed anymore. Even in crowded schools that aren't able to socially distance, there's not enough studies to show teachers and students are contracting the virus at school. The parents in Smithville School District are smart. They're well educated. They've read and studied and learned about COVID. And with all the knowledge, they still voted to send their kids back 5 days a week. They know what this is costing their family, and they know what this is costing their children. The majority of parents are asking you to send their kids back to school.
Good evening and welcome.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me speak and accommodating my special request. I appreciate that very much. I wanted to start by saying for every doctor that thinks we shouldn't come back, you know, there's 10 out there that says we can't come back. And this is a very controversial issue. I think you all are aware of. I know I am, so I know you guys have been too. I've been talking to a lot of you and over the course of the last month, but I certainly sympathize with the first gentleman that spoke, and I think we all need to learn to sympathize with every aspect of this pandemic and what everyone is going through. And I wish I would have known about his situation, because I definitely would have been praying for him. And his wife. But Dr. Krim mentioned we should follow the science. And well, in fact, if we're following the science, and I know you guys probably heard this, the CDC has actually said that it is safe to return to school. So and it's safe to open, and the vaccines are not required for our teachers to teach. Although I would like to see them all receive one. Recently, I think you guys are probably aware, but St. Joe, Olathe, Platte, and Blue Valley all decided to come back, and you know, they didn't give the option of vaccines as a stipulation. Transmissions are very low right now. I look at it daily, and actually Clay County is looking pretty awesome for once compared to other counties. And so I was going to come here tonight and have a bunch of statistics for you guys, but I don't think you want them. I don't want to bore you either, but I decided to throw away everything I had and kind of at the last minute just speak from my heart. So I'm not really sure what might come out, but I hope it's okay. I'm not a mental health expert at all. I don't claim to be, but I do work with kids in the inner city, representing them with many injustices they face in their life. One of the biggest ones is education for them. And I always just like to go down there and help them. I feel like they're the least of these in our country, kids in the inner city. And I'm sure you all know that education in the inner cities is not the best. But I just would cross over the river at night and think I'll leave those kids down there and I'll come back to them tomorrow and help them. But recently, with people in my neighborhood and more people that understand what I do have reached out to me and shared with me their stories. And that's kind of when I woke up, that this is happening right here in our city. It's not just in the inner cities anymore. You can't cross the river and come home and just forget about it and think I'll deal with that tomorrow. It's happening to our kids right here. And that's what I'm here for tonight. I'm here to speak up for them, because there are lots of kids and lots of parents who have a lot of shame for what's going on with their kids, and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. In fact, everyone who's told me their story said, please don't tell anyone. Please don't mention it to anyone. Please don't mention my name. There's a lot of shame parents put on themselves for what their kids are going through right now. And I know this because I worked with families like this for years at a residential facility in Kansas. And so nobody wants to come out and talk about it. I don't even want to come out and talk about it tonight. I don't like public speaking at all. But here I am because I love kids, and that's what I'm going to stand up for. I'm going to stand up for them because they deserve to have someone in their corner. And when I was coming over here tonight, I had a good friend text me, and she didn't ask me to say this. I hope she doesn't kill me for saying it, but she said my junior has told me she just has given up on senior year already. She's already thrown in the towel. She doesn't care. Our kids feel like you're giving up on them. My own daughter just said to me a couple of weeks ago, I wish I could graduate in midterm, Mom, but she can't because she needs a few more credits. She said, I'm just so done with high school and all this. And that breaks my heart that these kids feel like they've been given up on. So anyway, I love this community very much. We moved here 17 years ago because of the school. So we were actually attending private school at the time, but we knew someday we were going to put our kids in public. And so we moved here for the school district. And I love this school. I love the teachers very much. There are numerous of them that have touched my kids' lives. And I don't know how my son would have made it through high school without Mrs. Sanders and Coach Reed and Coach Watt and others that affected his schooling. And I think of Mrs. Sinclair and Mr. Corcoran and Coach Ambrose and Mr. Spear, and oh my gosh, I could go on, that have touched my daughter's life. And they need these teachers. They need them to be the hero in their life. They need you guys to be the heroes in their life and think about them. Think about them too. I know I've gone back and forth with Todd, just trying to figure things out and understanding his perspective. I know there's issues on the teacher side, and there's issues on the parent side, and there's issues with the students, but we got to come together and think of everybody, not just one side or the other should get the priority. And basically, education should be the priority. So, anyway, I guess as I began to hear these stories, which I can't really tell you much about because I value people's privacy, but it's stories of kids having to get on medications, up their medications because of the anxiety and depression they're going through. 3 suicidal stories I heard about. I mean, this is real. This is hitting our kids. I had a mental health expert told me that it's like a pie. If you look at a kid's life is like a pie. They've got education, family, friends, and maybe extracurricular activities. And when you take one of those pieces of pies out of their life, we just expect them to be resilient, and some kids are, but some are not, and they cannot deal with this. And we've ripped education right from out from underneath them, and they need it, some of them, to survive. Not all of them, but some of them do. And those are the kids I'm here for tonight. They need their education back. It has been 1 year since they have not had a normal education. So I guess it doesn't really come down to whether this is right or this is safe, because both sides can argue that, right? I think you've probably heard from every angle and every side, but I guess I'm just here because these kids need you guys, and I hope you'll make the right decision to bring it back. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think that's the last of our public comments for this evening. Moving on, 10.0, that's our evaluations. 10.1 is our extracurricular activity program.
Yes, you have.
I had my mic muted too. Darren, are you ready to present?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
We can't hear you, Darren.
You can't
Sorry,
hear me?
I'll unmute my speaker. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes? All right. Yeah. Every couple of years, we do this program and data evaluation form, and each year I work with Mr. Winterbourne, Mr. Mosby, and we put together basically some criteria, talk about the positive things that we're doing, and some of the strengths of our extracurricular activity programs, and then also we talk about some of the weaknesses as well. So just like to provide this for you guys, and I know you've had this in your board packet. If you guys have any questions, I'm here to answer any questions, or if we need to clarify anything.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Schaefer regarding the extracurricular activity evaluation?
Darren, this is Susan.
Hi, Susan.
Hey, I want to say I just think the 8th graders moving to the Suburban League this year and the middle school was a good thing, and I want to thank you guys for that. It gave us some good competition, and we didn't have to play Cameron 6 times. So,
Right.
so thank you to everybody for that. My only question is you guys mentioned that we are behind in some sports, some sports for coaches in regards to the Suburban League. How does our number or our student numbers compare to the Suburban League other schools? Does that play a picture in how many coaches we need, I guess?
Well, our numbers are very strong, and the Suburban Conference is made up like 27 schools, and the division that we're in, the blue division, we have probably us, Black County and Kearney have 3 of the stronger activity programs of everybody in that division. So and I know, getting some information for Denise this week, I noticed we already have 500 students involved in MSHA activities before the spring numbers even. So, I'm expecting we'll have close to 600, 600 total out of our 900, which is a really strong number. And, you know, and I always mention to everyone, I know we're the smallest school right now in the Suburban Conference, and that may change. But, you know, we offer just as many teams as, you know, a lot of the big schools, and you know, our community supports that. And, you know, that's something we're definitely proud of here at Smithville.
Definitely, I think so. So, you know, it was mentioned maybe we need to look at additional coaches. So that's just something that in the future, or looking at that, I was just wanting to ask that question. So thank you.
Yeah, and as far as the coaches specifically, what I did a couple of years ago is we went through every sport that we offer compared to all the other schools in our part of our conference. And basically, we just said, okay, we're 2 behind the average here, and we find an average, and then we found the high and the low, and we just wanted to be average. And I think basketball right now is the one that we're really severely understaffed. We only have 3 paid positions, and I think the booster clubs pick up at least 1, maybe 2, and you know, to give us 5. But 5 is what a lot of the schools in our conference have. So you know, we came up with a plan a couple of years ago. We called it a 3-year plan, but we just haven't started it yet because of some of the financial issues we've had. But you know, we have a plan. We just need to hopefully get it going. And I think each year in that 3-year plan, we're going to add 3 coaching positions. So as hopefully get caught up after 3 years was our goal. So if we ever get to that point where we can start that, it would, you know, definitely be nice.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Schaefer? Okay, thank you, Darren.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Okay, moving on, 11.1, our general financial review.
Yeah, I've asked Mr. Kruger to come in this evening to provide a brief presentation on the financial review. Mr. Kruger.
Can everyone hear me? I'm going to try and share my screen. As I'm doing so, I do want to, let's see here. Present. Okay, so this evening, I just want to kind of give a highlight of the current fiscal year that we are in, which is FY21, the FY21 budget. And then briefly, I want to go ahead and talk just about some of the preparation work that's starting for FY22. Currently, FY21, as you recall, we started FY21 basically on the heels or in the hole of FY20. And that's my first point in the presentation that I want to highlight there, that again, as a result, direct result of the withholdings that occurred last year from the governor as a result of the economic turndown from COVID, there was about a $550,000 withholding in June that we were made aware of. We were on track and we're, through very careful planning, basically going to have a balanced budget last year. We operated roughly a $32 million budget. And again, we were going to come within a few $1,000s in the black, but that withholding happened and shortfall happened in June. And ultimately we ended last year with a $515,000 deficit. As you know, when we start the next year's budget or the current year's budget, that comes forward. That just doesn't go away. So we started planning a budget for FY22 that started with FY21's deficit. So when you approved a budget in June of 20 for FY21, we were projecting roughly an $822,000 deficit. But that has slowly come down as the year has gone along. And we are currently making 6 assumptions as we work towards the end of the year. As you know, we've received some reimbursement for COVID-related expenditures through CARES Act funds, through FEMA project grants, disaster grants we've submitted. We've also received some emergency funding from the elementary and secondary folks in the form of what they call URSA payments. We've received a current payment of URSA funds in this current year of about $85,000. In December, end of December, federal Congress approved a second issuance payment. Smithville's allocation was about $273,000. That's currently been allocated to the state of Missouri, but currently the state of Missouri has not appropriated those funds. I am making the assumption that we will receive those funds before the June 30th. And that is a major player in this year's budget. If we don't receive those funds in June or by July 1st, we're still allocated those funds. It just won't be reflected in this year's budget, if you're tracking with me. We're also assuming that this year's budget, the state aid payment, again, the governor withheld roughly $550,000 in June. He held approximately $550,000 in July. So over $1 million has been withheld from our school district alone, again, because of COVID-related impact to the economy. We are assuming in the budget that we will get 97% of what we were owed. Currently, DESE is projecting about 95.5%, but they've told us that those numbers continue to increase. So again, we are projecting 97. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there that we're counting on to come forward. We're also assuming that our COVID-related expenditures do not exceed our COVID-related revenues as we work through the remaining part of the year. We also are assuming that we're not going to have to make additional supplemental payments to the self-insurance pool for our self-insurance benefits. I have included the second payment, which you have as an action item later tonight in the equation. One other factor, and we typically do this in the third budget revision, we have not updated FY21's activity funds this year to date. We typically do that in the third budget revision. But as the year has gone along, because of COVID, we've been really limited on the amount of revenue that we've been able to generate as a result of our activities. To balance those scales, though, our expenditures have somewhat been drastically reduced also. So I'm hoping there's not a huge negative impact there, but not having, gate receipts, for example, in the fall, $100,000 by the time you add soccer and football and softball and et cetera, all those activities together, that's a big impact. That will have a big impact, hopefully not a negative impact. And then finally, we are still assuming at this point that all the accounts that are budgeted will be fully expended. And I'm telling you they won't be, but we are still assuming they are until we get close to the end. For example, we've set aside budget line items for travel, for professional development, for clubs and tutoring and et cetera. But because of COVID, it just won't be possible to expend all those things. So when this is all said and done, we are still projecting about a $300,000 deficit as we speak in the current FY21 budget. So quick highlight on FY21. FY22 work has begun preparing for next year's budget. Right now, I am projecting that the only increase in revenue that we will receive will be local revenue, which makes up about 57% of our total revenue. And that's because next year is a reassessment year. And I am anticipating that our property value in the Smithville School District will increase by at least 3% when you include new construction and personal property and so on and so forth. I will throw out though that as at last look, the current CPI is estimated at 1.4%. Not getting too deep into the weeds, but because of the Hancock Amendment, again, we are limited on how much additional revenue we can get. So we're using 3%. We think that will generate about $340,000 of additional revenue for the Smithville School District next year. We're anticipating that federal revenue will be fairly flat. Again, we're not sure what kind of relief packages will be made from the federal government, but right now we're just assuming that federal revenue will remain flat. We are also assuming next year, as we develop the budget, that state revenue will be fully funded, that the basic formula for the foundation formula that funds public education, which is about 36% of our revenue, will be paid in full. I will tell the board though that we're paid on a per pupil basis, and we are forecasted next year to drop 21 students based on the size of our current senior class, coupled with survival rates for all the other grades, and then plugging in roughly 180 kindergarten students. It's just, we're not quite filling the gap. And again, until COVID kind of pans out, we're just kind of doing an educated guess as far as that is concerned. And again, county revenue, we think will be flat. We are anticipating, as a result of the early separation program that the board has put into place, that the net savings will be approximately $95,000 after the board pays their liability associated with that. So that is a significant savings over FY21. We are also making some assumptions as we prepare FY22 budget that the board will roll the salary schedule. So all eligible staff that are able to move for experience in their particular lane will move down for certified and non-certified staff. We estimate once we've taken out those folks participating in the separation agreement, the cost of rolling will be about $180,000. So that number is pretty close. Right now, as we're building FY22, we are assuming no additional staff, no additional FTE at this time. Again, that could change. We're working through that as we speak. We're also assuming that our medical board paid medical cap will increase. Currently in the working copy, we've got a 10.2% increase factored in. That cost to do a 10.2% increase would basically be increasing the board's paid cap $60 per member per month for board paid benefit. That does cost about $240,000 to do that $60 increase of that cap. Right now, I've got those numbers plugged in. There is some hidden liability, however, with that, because as you recall, our actuaries are suggesting to fully fund the medical benefits, we'll need about a 23% increase. Please keep in mind, we are self-insured. So it is not a requirement. It is not a requirement that we change the board paid cap at all for our benefits. It's not required. However, because we are fully funded, or excuse me, self-funded, we pay for what we use. And at the end of the day, if we do not increase the cap, there is a strong probability based on our loss ratios and our actuaries that we will have to make an additional supplemental payment next year if we do not do it in the form of monthly premiums to cover our costs. We're estimating right now about a 3% general increase in overall contracted services, transportation, food service, power and light, water, so on and so forth. We've also calculated some costs associated with potential salary increases. If we do a $500 increase, for example, for certified staff, we estimate that cost to be about $140,000. We estimate that if there's a cost to increase the non-certified staff, 12 cents, which is proportionately about the same percent to the non-certified as $500 would be the certified, that cost would be about $28,000. So all those things I've mentioned, again, we have some decisions to make. I won't go through each of those items, but please note, and if you do not have it on your calendar, May 3rd, we have a budget workshop that will be held hopefully face-to-face, but if not, we'll do it virtually. And we will have a preliminary budget to you in June at your June 16th meeting, which will be the preliminary budget for FY22. And likely we will have a third budget revision for FY21. I apologize I took so long. I get excited about this stuff. I'll answer any questions that you have.
Hey, Wayne,
Hold on here.
1 second while Denny mutes the speaker. Good. So I have a question.
Yes.
You should be able to hit the speaker down in the bottom right corner. Good.
I can hear you.
Right, so we add the additional 10.2% of the estimated cost for our self-insured to try to reduce our overall liabilities at the end of the year that we might overuse. Say we don't overuse that, do we get that back or does that roll over? What does that look like?
Yeah, because we're self-insured, that actually goes to a bank account that is kept by the insurance pool, and that money is Smithville's money that sits in that account, and it provides a fund balance, so to speak, for future utilization. It's our money. So if we overfund that, we have access to that. If we underfund that, we have to fill that bucket back up.
And we have done that in the past. We have built our reserves up to $800,000 just because our premiums were exceeding our expenditures. So that's the idea, right? To get that built up so that when you run into the leaner times, you can lean on that and then to pay.
So, but essentially that once we put those funds in and we invest those dollars, even if they roll over, they're restricted for that type of insurance pool. It's not money we can pull back out, correct?
Correct. So there are options. For example, we could take what was referred to as a premium holiday. So if we have a balance in that account, 1 month, for example, we just wouldn't remit a payment. For example, we remit about $200,000 a month to that account for premiums. And if we built up a big surplus, we could, if we chose to, we could take a premium holiday.
Okay, because that was the root of what I'm getting at is trying to understand, do you obligate the money and restrict it in a certain manner in tight budget situations, or do you allow yourself the flexibility with the realization there's a chance that you're going to have to pay that on the back end, but there might not be, which will give you flexibility to reroute and use those funds that aren't restricted for just insurance. But it sounds like what I hear you saying is over the stretch, if that pool, if we have a reserve built up that we can start remitting payment, which puts cash back into other uses that we can utilize it for. So same.
Correct.
Thing. Okay.
Correct.
Hey, Wayne,
Yes.
am I seeing this right? For the 2021 or 2022 preliminary budget, we're already looking at being in a $550,000 deficit right out of the chutes.
Yes, Scott, that's an illustration, and that makes the assumption that we're doing the 10.2% increase in insurance. We're doing 500 certified schedule. We're doing 12 cents to the non-certified schedule, and you're rolling both certified and non-certified schedules. So you're doing all those things, and that's what gets you to that roughly that 550,000. And right now there is no recommendations being made. That's just for illustration purposes.
Thanks.
What I will say at this point, though, is your superintendent, we've had great performance in this self-funded pool over the last 10 years. I believe Wayne can correct me if I'm wrong, but an average increase of 2 to 3% year over year while we've been a member of this pool. Last year was really, really rough. We ate through our reserves and even had to make some supplemental payments. This year is even more rough. We're struggling again for a second year in a row. So if you follow organizations and health insurance, you know, it's a roller coaster ride. You know, you have bad years and then they get better. Well, we've had a couple of bad years here. The issue that I struggle with as the superintendent is that, you know, it's one thing to have a bad year or it's one thing to have really, really expensive electricity when you've leveled your electricity payment, right? And so you know every month that your electricity payment is going to be such and such amount. So when you go to fully funded, you agree on this is the rate that we're going to pay, and it's going to be that for every month, and then they assume the risk, right? So I believe that it would behoove us to at least take a look here at the fully funded model versus what we've been doing, the self-funded model. And I don't have any preconceived notions. I'm not going to, I don't have the expectation to come to you and to make a change. I just think that it is appropriate with our taxpayer dollars that we study this to make sure that we're doing the right thing at this point in time in being in this pool, and should we remain in this pool. So the pool that we're in requires a 9-month leeway before you exit the pool. So we are actually putting together an RFP for a broker now, this spring. So that selection would be made this spring. Of course, you would be involved in that process, and that person then could help us from the fully funded side. Obviously, we have some familiarity with the self-funded side, and we would bring together some people to help us study this issue, some stakeholders. I've already asked one of your colleagues if you're comfortable with having a board member helping us with Sarah's background in insurance. I've asked Sarah if she would help us with that. We'll have a couple of representatives from the Salary and Benefits Committee on there, some staff members, just to study this thing inside and out and look at it from all different angles to be sure that right now we're doing what's best for us financially, but also for our employees as it relates to insurance. Due diligence, I think it needs to be done here. It would start early in the fall, that process, and I don't think it'd probably take more than a week to go through all of the data and our performance in the pool and look at some different providers and so forth. So that's kind of where I'm headed with that. I wanted to, it's as good a time as any to let you know that that's what I had cooking here.
Well, the health insurance increase is about what, 2/3 of what it's going to cost to roll the schedule and add some monies for the salary schedule. So I mean, it's huge.
If we went with that,
right? I mean, we did everything.
We're still working with Mercer,
right?
And still trying to find some tweaks. I know some of our plans that we're paid for now have become buy-up plans, right? And so cost sharing, we did a survey with our staff, and cost sharing, certainly people wouldn't want to jump right to that, but there's an interest in keeping good insurance, even if it meant having to pay for some of that yourself. Some of you in this room, I know for a fact, some of you help pay for your insurance, and it's good insurance, and you like that insurance. We need to retain an option that does not cost out of pocket. But there's a lot to look at, a lot of different angles, which is why Wayne's numbers here are preliminary. So.
Hey, Wayne, one thing I noted was that May 3rd was when you said you had a budget workshop scheduled. The city board meetings have been moved to Tuesday nights. So that would actually already be on the books as Tuesday, May 4th for your benefit.
It's actually the board's pleasure. So if the board would like to do it on the 4th, we can do it on the 4th.
Well, we've usually just tried to consolidate them into the same night. So we'll see coming up there how we progress.
Very good.
Is that all you have, Mr. Kruger, for the financial update? Any other questions on the financial update for Mr. Kruger? Thank you, Wayne. Okay, 11.2. Enrollment summary.
Yeah, real quick. As you look at the document, if you've been on the board very long, you know that typically the enrollment kind of dips throughout the course of the year, especially after the semester. Well, that's not the case here this year, and this has happened a time or two before, but we started the year with the official count date at 2626, and here February 12th, or 2652, so we're up a little bit for this time of year.
Does that include the seniors that graduated at semester, or that number still includes those seniors? No, it does not. So with all those seniors that graduated at semester, the high school went up 17 students at the beginning of the second semester. Because we had at least 20, if not 25 seniors graduated semesters, so. Okay. Okay, thank you. Is that all you had on the enrollment update? Any other questions or comments on the enrollment update?
But am I correct that we get paid for the 26 students, right? Even though because that's the official count. I mean, we don't.
We're paid on average daily attendance, and it's cumulative for the entire school year. So it's not just one day of enrollment. So as students come in, that fluctuates on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mr. Kruger.
I was stating that I have you controlled by my speakers on my computer, and I really never knew that I could mute you, but we're working our best to get your comments in there. So raise your hand or make faces at me or something when you have something to add. Okay, moving on to, I believe, 11.3, COVID-19 update.
Yes. Quite a bit of Some of the structure you've seen before, and then we'll get into some new information. So we're going to kick it off here with Denise to review current data.
Okay, you guys should be used to these two slides now. Incident rates per 100,000, you can see that there's been a little bit of change here. We actually had one school in the green this week at Eagle Heights, so that's a positive turn. The high school remains in the red and the rest are yellow. You can see the number of positive cases listed below. This past week, the dashboard was posted today. We had a really good week with 3 positives and 23 quarantines. So that's good news as well. So you will see the updated information here on the next slide. You will see the community data as of the 12th. Again, the positivity rate for Clay County is in the red. The incident rate turned green because it is decreasing. Hospitalization and school mitigation measures are also in the green. When you break it down to the city of Smithville, you can see where we have total number of cases as 1,022 and the incident rate there, 7,916 cases per 100,000. The 2-week rates, which are 25 cases, and then the 1-week rate, we are breaking it down for 1 week, and you can see there were 6 cases in the last week. And we did that because later in the presentation where the CDC is looking at it by the week, we tried to include that weekly data. We had to ask for that information, and so it's provided. Any questions about this information? Okay.
Okay, area school districts update. We talk a lot about school districts and what we're comparing and so on and so forth. One thing to note here is you don't see any Kansas school districts on here. They are certainly a part of our metro. We work a lot with the cooperating school districts of Greater Kansas City as we try to collaborate and gather information. And so a lot of our data is on the Missouri side of things. But in this first bullet here, I've listed all of the school districts that I'm comparing us to. So you can look through that. I do reach up to St. Joe. You will notice that there are no really small school districts in here. I've removed them. So this is kind of our pool, if you will. And so of these 20 school districts, we know that 5 districts are in person. They're full on in person 4 or 5 days a week. And we do know that 2 districts are reporting they will move or would like to move to in person in March. And I say will or would like to because they still have some things to work through with their counties. Nothing is certainly definitive, but I'm going to go ahead and throw them in as 2 more districts. So that's 7 school districts that are either in person or are moving to in person, we believe. The next bullet, 10 districts. Did we? Okay. 10 districts are hybrid, and 1 is moving from virtual to hybrid. That was recently reported. Kansas City Public Schools doesn't feel like they are going to get their vaccines for their staff quick enough, but they do want to make a move to more in person. So they're going from virtual to hybrid. So 10 districts hybrid, 1 is moving, so 11 districts in the hybrid model. 2 districts in the metro are remaining virtual at this point in time, as far as I can tell. So that leaves us with roughly 1/3 of the districts are in person, are planning to go in person, and 2/3 are hybrid or virtual. So you got pretty easy on the Missouri side, divide that up in 2/3. Okay. Dr. Cradfield? Vaccine update, very disappointing. The last time we spoke, we had some good news we were celebrating, or at least I was celebrating. Disappointed now. Since then, we've learned that every state that touches Missouri, with the exception of Oklahoma, is currently vaccinating their teachers. Missouri has lagged behind. It seems like since the get-go of this whole program, and that continues to be the case with getting teachers vaccinated. So that is very, very disappointing. Some sources suggest it will be April in Missouri before teachers are eligible for vaccination. By the way, they are in line, if you will. The Cooperating School District of Greater Kansas City has written a letter to the governor. You should have that in your packet, pleading the governor to move the teachers up in the priority. If the teachers were moved up in priority, if our teachers were like those of the priority of the states around us, this conversation tonight would be a very, very different conversation. So we continue to work with our additional partnerships and trying to get ready for when our teachers are allowed to get vaccinated. We do have the clinic in line and ready to support us, but we are encouraging our staff to get signed up for the mass vaccination site at Cerner. That seems to be like it will be the best, earliest option for our staff to get vaccinated. So we want our staff to get their shots in arms, those that want shots in arms, as quickly as possible. And hopefully some order will then will come to be as we try to organize those efforts. Okay, so we're keeping track of that in the district. Go ahead, Michelle. All right, so we've heard a lot of talk about the new CDC guidelines, and I've heard a lot of different takes and variations on what people have read or what they think they have read. This is the handiest document that I can find, and you have a copy of this. It's just a 2-pager, and I think it goes into about as much depth as you would want to. If you want to get into the weeds with it, you can. And I'll give you a couple of examples of where I have gotten into the weeds a little bit to help me understand it and what it means. And you know, it's supposed to be a source of science to help school districts, and so that's how we're going to try to use it. So the CDC guidelines, the new guidelines, layered mitigation strategies, not unlike what we've heard before, right? Masks and social distancing being at the very top of that list. There is some talk in the documents about cleaning and things of that nature, but masks and social distancing continue to be at the top of the list. Phased mitigation and learning modes. We have some of that going on in that we have elementary is in person, our high school and middle school is hybrid. So we have some different modalities going on in our district, but they have provided a color-coded implementation by community transmission. So we'll get into that here in the next slide. And then the next section is additional prevention. It talks about testing, and then it talks about vaccination. The CDC calls for teachers to be high on the priority list, but warns against vaccinations alone permitting a return to school. So let's just pause there for a second. As you look at this document, on the second page, below the color coding, it says, very end of this page, access to vaccination should nevertheless not be considered a condition for reopening schools for in-person instruction. Meaning this shouldn't be the only approach, right? Even after teachers and staff are vaccinated, schools need to continue mitigation measures for the foreseeable future, including requiring masks in schools and physical distancing. So you can't hang your hat on vaccinations alone. You would need to also maintain social distancing, masking, the other mitigating factors that have been outlined by the CDC. So anyway, let's move on to the next slide. So CDC guidelines, the mitigation by level of community transmission. This is when you get into the colors. And we've tried to break this down in a lot of different ways because it can mean a lot of different things. Like a lot of data, how you want to slice and dice it here. So again, we've tried to dice it in a lot of different ways. So our county, when we consult with our county about this new CDC guideline, this mitigation and these different colors, they provide us a jurisdiction rate of 118 per 100,000. That's the color red. If you're looking at that chart, that's the color red. Again, that's the county, the jurisdiction of the county. They also throw in the positivity rate, which is listed in the two-pager as another form to develop color. Positivity rate for the past 7 days as an indicator is also at red, 12.84%, so it's also at red. But looking at the county doesn't look good. Over the past 7 days, it says red. Well, that's the county. What about Smithville? What about 64089? So when you look at, again, just plugging in dates and data that we have available, 124 to 26. So that's a 2-week period. And the CDC is calling for a 7-week, the preceding 7-week period. But if you plugged in this 2-week period, that's 193 per 100,000, which is in the red. That's for 64089. So that'd have been just 3 weeks ago. However, if you plug in just last week, 27 to 213, that's 46 cases per 100,000. And that puts us in the moderate, which is yellow. So applying the CDC guidelines there with that last bullet would be the least stringent, if you will. It would be the most allowable to open things up. Taking the preceding 7 days, it would give us the transmission of yellow, which means that by using the chart, K-12 schools open for full in-person instruction, physical distancing of 6 feet or more to the greatest extent possible. Then it has the little note there, right? Little subscript number 3. You go down to number 3 for the note. It says if physical distancing of at least 6 feet among all students, teachers, and staff within a class, cohort, or pod is not possible at all times, schools should ensure physical distancing between classes, cohorts, and pods. So to me, that sounds like they're talking about cohorting. They are talking about cohorting, kind of like what we do in the elementary grades. I'm not exactly sure what that's trying to say, to be honest with you, and I think it's something that is worthy of exploration. So if you look down on sports in the yellow, remember the data, we're on the data from the preceding 7 days, has us in the yellow. If you look down to the yellow, under sports, it says sports and extracurricular activities with masks and physical distancing of 6 feet or more required. Not to the extent possible, required. So that's the application of the mitigating strategies with the new CDC guidelines. It is somewhat helpful and it is somewhat confusing all at the same time. The data that we plug into it, I would certainly like some more versus just one week period, 1 7-day period, the preceding being the yellow. But I do like that our previous week was so low. It has it in the moderate category. I do like that we had 3 from our last reporting period in our district. We had 3 positive cases. So that is good news. So, we have some bright spots to look to as far as the data is concerned as well. Okay, Michelle. All right, social distancing, again, is another big issue with the CDC, and I'm going to let Michelle take this section of the presentation.
So again, focusing on that aspect, that mitigating factor of social distancing. Our elementary students are cohorted, so that means that they do not interact with any other classes during the day. They sit, if they're in the lunchroom having lunch, then they are with their class, or they're having lunch in their classroom where they're just with their class. And even at recess, they are assigned an area on the playground so that they are not intermingling with other students. So we are able to cohort there. And then we have average class sizes of 20.33. We do have some classes that are around the 25 range, but we have others that are in the 16 and 17 range. I was asked to pull some data regarding the class sizes at the high school and the middle school. Before we get into the high school, I just want to share that all virtual classes were removed from this. Band was removed because it is extremely large and it skews the data. I took out any classes that are not held on campus. So our NCC classes, our Northland CAPS, that shouldn't apply because they're not actually here in our building. And then I also removed SPED classes because those are not open to every kid. If we could put more kids in there, we would, but only special education class students are allowed to be in there. So those are also removed. We have 65 sections, 55% that have 20 or more students in them. In our current classrooms, to do the social distancing that we're able to do, 15 really is about the max. So I've provided this data regarding the number of students in each class to kind of give a picture of what it would look like as we fill those classrooms up with students. 31% of our classes at the high school have 25 or more students in them, and 15% have 28 or more students in them. At the middle school, I also removed special education classes and I removed virtual classes. However, band is not a huge section at the middle school, so I left band in there. 64% of the sections have 20 or more students in them. 24% have 25 or more students in them, and then 8% have 28 or more students in them. And then I've included some pictures of classrooms to kind of give you an idea of what this means. So this is, I picked classrooms that represented various stages of building. So like when I get to the high school, there's going to be a classroom that's in the original part of the building. There's going to be one that was recently renovated. There will be one in the hallway that was just added on, and then another in the hallway that was in the construction prior to that, just to give a sampling of classrooms. At the middle school, I picked in various stages of the building just to give a representation. And so this is room 67 at the middle school. There are currently 27 desks in here, and you can kind of see how the room is laid out. The number of potential close contacts in this classroom, I measured 6 feet radius from a desk that was at the perimeter, and there were 4 students that would fall within the close contact range at the perimeter. If I go to an interior desk, there were 7 students. If the desks were full, there would be 7 students who would be considered close contacts. And then I've included the class sizes for this classroom should we come back 100%. And these are the class sizes. So there are 27 desks. There are 2 sections that this teacher has that have 26 students in them. That's all but 1 desk full. Going on to room 86. This classroom only has 20 desks in it. So they've removed some desks because of the number of students that are currently occupying the classroom. With the 20 desks at the perimeter, there would be 4 close contacts if someone contracted the virus. In the interior, there are 6. Under class sizes, you'll see some of them are bolded. Those are the classes that have more students than we currently have desks. So one thing that you need to consider as you're looking at this classroom and considering the perimeter and the interior counts is that we would actually have to bring 7 more desks into this classroom, which we can do. But that means that we have kids in closer contact with each other, and the perimeter and the interior numbers would probably go up. I wasn't going to guess at what those are, so I provided the information of how many additional desks we would need to bring in order to accommodate all the students. And this is room 79. Again, this classroom has 22 desks. At a perimeter desk, there are 5 within close contact range. In an interior, there are 7. This classroom is only used for 3 blocks out of the day. So there is a class of 26. We would need to bring 4 additional desks in here to accommodate that. And then every one of those desks would be full. So again, the perimeter and the interior numbers may increase because of that. Also in these classrooms, the teacher is within 6 feet of the front row if they are at their whiteboard. They are not able to instruct from the front of the classroom without being within 6 feet of the students. This is one of our newly renovated science labs. So I also tried to get a variety of types of classrooms. This one, there are currently 22 seats available for students, and the teacher uses not only the tables in the center, but also the lab tables. And because of that, being able to use the lab tables, at this point, there would be 3 close contacts on a perimeter seat, but also 3 in an interior seat. So that's really pretty good considering where we currently are. However, this teacher has classes of 29, 28, and 26. So we would need to bring 7 additional seats into this class, and that would bring students closer together and increase the number of potential close contacts. This is room 117. 28 desks in this classroom. Again, with the perimeter, there would be 4 close contacts. In an interior seat, there would be 7. The largest class that meets in this classroom is 29, so we would need to bring in 1 additional desk. But again, if this classroom is full, then we'll have a lot of kids close together. This is in the new wing, right over here. There are 16 desks currently in this classroom. And so because of that, there would be 3 students within the close contact range at the perimeter, 4 at the interior, but this teacher has classes of 25, 19, and 19. So we would need to bring 9 additional desks in to accommodate the largest class. And that certainly would bring kids in closer contact with each other. This is a computer lab. This is actually a business lab that uses computer stations. A number of potential close contacts here are 4 and 7 for the interior. These class sizes aren't large enough that we would need to bring in any additional computer stations, and there's 1 class section that would fill almost all of the seats. And then this is a classroom that was in the original build. It happens to be one of the largest classrooms up there. This is in the social studies wing. There are 32 desks currently in this classroom. The number of potential close contacts at the perimeter would be 5. In the interior, there would be 9. And you can see that we have plenty of desks in here, but we do have some pretty large classes. There's a 29, a 26, and 2 28s. So just to give a visual for what we're talking about when we're saying that we would fill the space. And unlike our elementary students, our secondary students are much bigger. And so, they do take up more space than our elementary kids do, and we're able to distance our elementary kids just a little bit better. Again, in several of these classrooms, I think there was 1 classroom where the teacher would not be within 6 feet of the students in the front row, but in the others, they're in fairly close contact. So are there any questions about the seating and the potential close contacts and our ability to social distance?
Michelle, I just want to thank you. I did ask you to give me this because I wanted myself and then some others just to see that how big the classes were, because I think sometimes we think the classes are smaller and we can just stick more people in there. So this was very helpful to me to see, and the pictures are very helpful. I think, it'd be very hard to separate in some of those rooms. And I'm just afraid with those closeness that we get more quarantines, and that's something I'm trying to avoid. So thank you for that info.
You're welcome. And that is a concern for sure. At the end of the assessment workshop, when you received your last update, you asked us to put a committee together and to look at a couple of things. 1, what could we immediately do to increase student contact time?
Michelle, before we move on, I got a couple questions for you.
Absolutely.
And I think this will just help me better understand kind of the limitations and structure. So originally, I seen several instances where we would have to bring in additional desks for class sizes. Well, if we knew that classroom had a limitation, why did we schedule the size of that class so large? Why did we allow so many students to enroll? So if I have a class that seats 28, why did I allow 29 to enroll?
We can easily bring in another desk if we need to under normal circumstances, and that isn't a big issue.
I understand that, but we haven't been operating in normal circumstances since March.
Correct,
Right,
but we
so-
also have only had half of our student population in the classrooms since the beginning of the school year. And so they've made accommodations and just taken some of those desks out so they can spread
I
out.
don't disagree, but where I'm trying to get us is the foresight so we can work our way back. And I think we have an opportunity to be mindful of how we schedule classes next year, moving forward.
Well, we would have to schedule additional hours, right? What? I don't know.
Well, one thing, Ian, I mean, like, we have these kids that are wanting this course, and the parents are wanting them too. So, you know, if we start limiting sizes, then we're gonna have kids that aren't gonna get the courses when they want and when they need it for their education in the high school. Because in high school, it all bases. You take one school and it builds up. So it presents another problem in that we're not gonna be able to offer all the great classes we are. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that's one reason they try to accommodate. I think Smithville tries to accommodate as many kids as they can. And that is one reason some of our classes are a little bigger. Is that right, Michelle? I'm not trying to
Yes,
speak
and
for
now I
you.
understand the line of questioning. So when you have classes that maybe you only have one or two of those courses offered during the course of the day, we try to balance the numbers as much as we can, but our priority is to give the kids the courses that they ask for. And so we do have some class sizes that get large. One thing to consider in our social studies department, we actually eliminated 3 sections this spring for a variety of reasons. And so those students were sent to other social studies classes so that they could get the required courses that they needed, and that caused the numbers to go up. But we do have, you know, courses that are only offered a couple of times a day. And in order to accommodate all those requests, sometimes those courses get very large. Now, in one of those, like room 17, for example, you notice there was a section with 5 kids in it. That's also a very specialized course, but there aren't very many kids who have the prerequisite to get to that. And so that's a class of 5 seniors who just happened to get that far in math that they were able to take that course. So that balances out. I mean, if we have that section of 5, then that means that there's another math class that more students have the prerequisites for that might be much larger, just because we are devoting that section to those kids. But we do try, the counselors try very hard to balance the class sizes. And sometimes it just gets difficult because of the specific courses the students have requested.
Yeah, I only offer the comment as a point of reflection as we look at strategies to get back to 100%. I don't have any interjection, or I'm not trying to be cast or throwing stones at how we've done it. But the point I'm trying to get to is, I think if we have the opportunity to work and start strategizing how we structure our environment and inform the parent that if we want to get back to 100%, it's going to cause educational limitations in certain class offerings, they're probably going to want to get back to 100%. And so I think we just need to start structuring our mindset and how we look at the next, you know, quarter and into next year on what that looks like, because COVID is not going away. Some other questions I have, and this is something we have done at our institution, is we have taken, so are we working off, so I'm kind of looking at two frame of minds in terms of cohorting students versus cohorting teachers. Do we not have the environmental capacity to create barriers and socially distance our teachers? What is the primary limitation to staying hybrid? Is it the overall safety and concerns of kids as a vector throughout our district? Is it primarily driven and dominated by protecting our staff? And then if that is, then if we say it's staff driven and that's where we want to work from, how do we, and do we have the capability to structure our environments in our classrooms to cohort them and distance them from the students in which they're teaching with barriers and so on? Do we have that capability? Which kind of segues into my question. I get the pictures are helpful, Michelle, but understanding the square footage of the classroom per size. And I think what we're really running into is we just have a lot of kids in a lot of class, which drastically reduces that. And I think as you work next year with our counselors and our curriculum, I think we'll have opportunities to kind of maybe help with that. But can we, and do we have the capability from an environmental standpoint to cohort and isolate our teachers to help further mitigate and reduce risk for them?
Yeah, I think, and I've been thinking a lot about that, Ian, and, you know, the square footage that we do have and the spaces that, you know, we can congregate, you know, with our students to teach these classes. I think next year, we're really going to need to look at things differently. As you said, this is not going away. So I think I'm understanding your line of questioning and what you would be encouraging us to do.
Lisa, do you want to offer anything regarding the personal?
Yeah. When we have barriers, you know, we've had everything from shower curtains to panels to you name it, to do some social distancing and to provide barriers. However, when a case of a positive case is in a classroom, it does not matter. The mitigation measures do not matter, which is really frustrating when you're trying to contact trace. So you have to wear a mask and you have to social distance, but even if you have those things in place, you still have to quarantine. So that's just what's unfortunate.
Yeah, and I get the quarantine, but guys, my concern is not the quarantine. It's more the health and safety of our staff and students. Like, so if we have a chance, regardless if they're quarantining and stuck at home, if we have a chance to mitigate the spread of disease and then contracting that disease, I think that's more of a favorable outcome. At that point, I really don't care if they're quarantined, to be honest. And I think it's, as we look, and Todd, this is a, you know, my vision is we look at next year and, you know, strategies to get back full time. I think we're going to have high risk staff and entities and people that we work with where we're going to have to arrange modalities in which they can teach and still provide an income and be effective. Maybe they're teaching from home to a group of students in a classroom or something to that effect. But I think those are things that we have to incorporate into our planning now so we can figure out what that looks like.
We've had some of that this year already. We've had 2 teachers teaching from home for reasons that you just mentioned.
I'm done, Michelle. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. So a couple weeks ago when we met, you asked us to get a committee together to formulate a plan for immediately increasing contact time, but then also what it would look like to transition into 100%, and then what would that final step look like. And so the principals invited staff members to participate on this committee. We met on February 8th and February 10th. To begin our work and collaboration in order to fulfill those requests for you. And so here you see a list of the people who participated. You know, they volunteered on very short notice and they gave up 5 hours of their at-home time to do this. So I want to extend a big thank you to them. But our last meeting on the 10th, I asked if there would be anyone from the committee who would like to come and present to the board, and Mr. Corcoran volunteered to do that. So he is going to walk through the work of this group, and he and I can field your questions. Yeah.
All right. Well, once again, I'm Justin Corcoran. I'm a math teacher and coach at the high school. It's wonderful to see you this evening. Just to kind of reiterate, the parameters of our work were essentially threefold. Number one, what can be done immediately to reduce the in-contact hours of the students? Number two, what would we do as a step to transition to 100% if that was asked of us? And then finally, what would be the final step to 100% attendance by this week? So those are the 3 parameters we operate under. So speaking to the first one, how to increase contact time as soon as possible, thinking about a hybrid schedule, our first target, if you will, is our virtual Wednesdays. And so we thought the best way to increase contact time was essentially to take that day and turn it into a hybrid day, a green or a white day. If you want to think math for a second, in the current model where Wednesday is a virtual day, you would average about 2 days in person a week, right? In the new model, what we've come up with, you would average about 2.5. days a week. And now it's assuming a 5-day week, and most weeks in April and May are 5 days. Now, we had a slight debate on the best way to implement such a strategy. Would you go green, white, and then alternate your Wednesdays, and then go green, white on Thursday, Friday as is now? Or would you go alternating green, white, green, white, green, white all the way through the end of the year? And at the end of our debate, we decided that it would be the most consistent for both the students and the teachers in terms of properly administering the curriculum to alternate green and white on and off throughout the entire semester. So example, week 1 would be green, white, green, white, green, that ending on Friday. The following week would be white, green, white, green, white, that ending on Friday. Hopefully that makes sense. And so with that in mind, that was our step to increase the number of contact hours per week for students. Now, there is one caveat to that, and that on Wednesdays is normally at the secondary level a late start. We have our PLC time where the different curriculum areas collaborate and co-plan different units, et cetera. And so in order to make it as seamless as possible for the schedule change, we thought it best to sacrifice some of that PLC time and collaboration in exchange for a consistent starting time for all of the students. So the PLC time would essentially be cut short some amount at both the high school and the middle school in exchange for a consistent start time every day. The other thing that is noteworthy is March 12th is currently listed as a early release day as it is the end of the quarter. And we thought it would be best to keep this as a virtual day because fitting 8 blocks into a early release can be rather difficult. And we did not feel it'd be worth the trouble. So there is one small virtual day on the schedule. So that was the first step, how to increase contact time as soon as possible. And that was our solution. Now, the second parameter we were given is how would we transition to 100%? And I feel like I should go ahead and say a lot of the teachers were very appreciative of Todd Schutz and Michelle Credifill's recommendation to wait for teacher vaccination, as that is a high priority on many of my colleagues' list. But the plan that we have decided is if you were to transition to 100%, you would want a schedule that essentially contained 4 hybrid days in a week and 1 100% in-person day in that week. That 100% day could be on Monday, it could be on Friday, it could be on Wednesday. That is still up for debate. At the end, we kind of thought Friday might be a good methodology. But anyway, with that in mind, if you think about mathematicals, that would average 3 days a week for each student, green, white, and then a 100% day. I suppose I should say the thought process behind putting that 100% day on either a Monday or a Friday was hopefully to reduce the number of quarantines, because that's going to be a big concern coming up. If you think about if someone was in class on Friday with 100%, and then on Monday they were to test positive, some of the contact tracing may be avoided on that Friday. But again, those are minor things to consider later. So moving on to the third thing was how would we go to a final 100% 5 days a week? And we thought with the model that I just explained upon, the 4 hybrid days and 1 100% day, that we should continue that probably at least 4 weeks to collect data so we can actually make an informed decision before we proceed any further. And with that in mind, I guess some things to kind of consider and to think about. The reason that we came up with this idea was a lot of our stakeholders really wanted a transition step before proceeding to 100%. There was a large thing on the survey data that we were presented. So we thought that was the best thing to honor that. Furthermore, in terms of the 4-week section to collect data, we thought number of quarantines would be important, any grade fluctuations, the impact on spring sports and activities, especially considering last year's spring sports and activities were heavily impacted. But there is one thing I would be remiss, and there were some concerns with the staff that were brought up, not necessarily in terms of the switching the Wednesday to a hybrid day, but more so the transition to 100%. And a lot of that focused on the increased quarantines to both staff and students. As the pictures kind of showed earlier, as the pictures had kind of showcased earlier, with 100% of students in attendance, there's going to be some amount of social distancing that will not be possible, thus increasing a decent amount of quarantines. And now those quarantines can lead to more lost contact time with students, which we're trying to maximize in the current schedule. Something that's always suggested, but rather difficult, is to remote into those classes when you're quarantined. But I would say that is a difficult objective to achieve. Again, going back to the spring sports and activities, I guess as a coach myself, I'm a little biased on this topic, but I can speak from a lot of my fellow coaches and people who participate in activities. They are very worried about their spring season, as it is very near and dear to their hearts, especially considering we lost one last year. Furthermore, the CDC guidelines that Todd Schutz had alluded to earlier, one of the major layers of protection was 6 feet social distancing, which again would prove to be rather difficult if 100% of students are in the building. So that is something to consider. Once again, I do appreciate the recommendation by Michelle Cradfield and Todd Schutz to recommend that the teachers be vaccinated, but the students would have no such opportunity if we move to 100% anytime soon. So that is something to consider. The other thing, we've started with a hybrid schedule with the students are succeeding with. I feel like the data is showing that they are doing well. So changing the schedule 2, 3, possibly 4 times in a semester, I feel like can be troublesome. I mean, you're really asking a lot in terms of work schedules for students, for parents, etc. Something that kind of goes under the table at times is when you think about like the locker room and the cafeteria are 2 places where social distancing will be very difficult. And you can think about the gym classes at the high school, if you had 100%, some of them would reach up to 70 kids. And now if you think, assuming it was a 50-50 split, you're talking about 35 kids in a locker room, which can be rather difficult in terms of changing, showering, etc. So then a lot of modifications, I think, would really have to be considered. And that does worry some of our staff. And then lastly, one thing that I did not think about initially is when you're transitioning to 100%, there is a non-zero number of students that will want to go to a virtual method of learning. And with that in mind, we simply cannot honor all of the classes that they are currently enrolled in. Some of the AP and dual credit courses, they've already paid for credit, but those are not actually offered in a virtual setting. That can be troublesome. Some classes are offered at launch, but this would be mid-semester, which remains a difficulty. Again, things to keep on your mind. I know this decision weighs heavy on a lot of people's hearts, and I thought it best to just share any concerns. And that there are benefits. I don't disagree with that either. But it is important to consider everything whenever you're discussing this plan. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. If I were to be honest, an emotionally charged subject for some teachers and parents as well, obviously. But I think we did a very good job of approaching it in a very logical manner. You know, that can be really tough, especially, you know, come up with a plan that maybe you don't love. But I really think that the staff tried to come up with the students in mind first. What's the best way to get them the best education and try to be the least invasive? And I think we did come up with that, yes. Absolutely.
You did. I would echo that. We purposely made sure that we had all sides of the issue represented in this group. And they came together with an incredibly collaborative spirit, looking for compromise and ways to do what you had asked them to do. So I was really impressed and very proud of this group of people and the way in which they went about this task.
So what's the next step and what's the timeline?
So the next step is the immediate transition to eliminate. The first step would be to eliminate the virtual Wednesday, which will begin next week. The next step, preferably after vaccination, would be to go to 3 days of attendance per week. And that would be 2 hybrid days for each student and then 1 100% attendance day. To collect some data on that to see what the impact is so that we can make an educated decision about what to do next. If the data indicated that we are safe, that our kids are safe, that our teachers are safe, then it would be a full 5 days a week, 100% attendance would be the recommendation of the team.
I want to thank you for the work you did. But in my very next breath, I think we missed the mark. As I recall from the February 2nd meeting, we had asked to have a plan where we could get 2 100% days prior to spring break. So if things did go south, we would have spring break to make up the difference. If we follow this particular plan, and again, the goal is to get students back 100%, if our vaccinations aren't going to come until April at best, and it takes 2 shots to get fully vaccinated, so our teachers get the first one on the 1st of April. A month later, they get the second shot. That's when we transition to a 1-day full-time, do that for 4 weeks. We're at the end of May, and we are not back 100%. So when the directive was to find a way to get our students back to 100%, possibly even by spring break, I think we missed the mark. That's the way from my seat, I just think we mixed the directive.
We understood the directive to be to find a immediate transition that would allow more contact time. And then with Dr. Schutt's final statements on the 2nd regarding the importance of vaccination, that would be an important factor in the transition as well. So I apologize if that was misunderstood.
Mr. Fales mentioned trying to get 2 100% days prior to spring break. When we left the meeting on the 2nd, that was my understanding of what we were going to try to do.
There we go. So we are getting the kids back a few more contact days before spring break by eliminating Wednesdays. Are we doing anything for the kids who were coming in on Wednesday or at the high school on Thursday and Friday to get that extra help?
I know that each building had an opportunity at the end of the January 10th meeting to talk about things like that, and they were brainstorming ways to continue that type of support even without the Wednesday. So I don't know the details, but I do know that the buildings were working on that because they feel that that support is very important.
I got several questions. I'm sorry. I wouldn't ask you so many questions if I didn't care. And it's truly just to enrich my perspective so it can help me land on where I think from my seat we need to go. So back on the benefits slide, you kind of outlined quick bullet points on maybe a concept of key indicators on what socializes our ability to return. Through this committee, have we outlined what those key indicators are and what that criteria is for transitioning? I know we got vaccine and I know you have the 3-day step. So fundamentally, I am happy that we are taking a step forward. I would have much rather preferred to have 3 contact days a week for each group. Now, granted, you guys were in the hot seat trying to figure out how you make that happen. I feel like you gave a great consideration to our staff, which I really appreciate because I've had very long, hard conversations with them and their concerns. But I feel like we maybe conceded a little bit in terms of what our parents might have wanted, at least the majority of that 55%. And it's a challenge, right? I don't think you're ever going to land in a perfect spot. So I am grateful for the step forward because I do think it will help us gather data and input, which will help us feed our own information. But I do wish it would have been 3 days a week. And that's why I wish we would have maybe made a motion and put a directive that we all agreed upon going forward, which I think would have better structured kind of, it wouldn't have left it so loose for interpretation. But the questions I have is, Justin, as key indicators coming out of that meeting with that committee, what are the key indicators you have socialized and solidified as these are the transitional steps and when we can move forward? Because without those, it's speculative to me, and I can't wrap my head around when it truly is safe. Like, what are those indicators?
So I think in terms of indicators to transition, you would probably look to the CDC guidelines would be my the thing I would be most confident in recommending to you. I wouldn't say that we're health professionals by any standard, so I would probably defer to someone who is more capable when coming to like what standards or data you would truly look at in order to determine when was a good transition step. Does that answer your question?
So it helps, but let me just share, with the source of information we've gotten over since we started this conversation. We have been given data from both sides that suggests why you can return and why you can't. Right? I heard a presentation from Dr. Schutz suggesting, well, it's with the additional, well, then I have another group who says this, and this is their interpretation of it. So it doesn't help the board reach a consensus or further direction on what that looks like. So at one point, we need to come together and say, this is what we're comfortable with as key indicators, and it needs to be kind of our platform. We have yet to really do that. We keep saying the CDC, but I hear two different groups telling me their interpretation of the CDC. So that's my struggle. And then we kind of hit on some things, and this is more Dr. Schutz, the futuristic side of my brain and how we get back and what's next year look like, because this isn't going away. With quarantines, what is our current capability to allow students to remote into a live classroom feed stream? And if it is poor and it's not there, there's a COVID capital expense idea that I think we should start working on now.
And to answer that question, we actually have ordered through a grant that we had available. We ordered before Christmas items, and they are just now arriving in my office because they are back ordered. The entire country is looking for this technology.
Perfect.
And it's difficult to get a hold of. But yes, we have ordered. We have 9 webcams for use for remote learning at the high school that just got delivered last week. I've got some similar items for the middle school sitting in my office. And I just got notification that some others are being shipped, but literally it's taken 2 months for them to get to us.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful that you guys have already went through that process in order. That I would have hated for us to say, well, we need to start planning it, right? Because I think as we have these conversations and we say, well, here's the limitations based on our current environment. Well, how do we manipulate and change that environment to promote and foster 100% back in-person learning? And I think that's a great step to help do that. We talk about the locker room and lunch. Those are great points. Now, my next question is Denise, how are the schools in person doing it? How's the lunchroom happening in person? How's the locker room happening? How are they supporting athletics? Those are 3 things that
I can tell you about the elementary school. Because
I'm talking with our different groups and the kids that rotate through all these different blocks, not cohorted. How are they doing it at that middle school and high school level?
So the schools that I referenced during our last meeting, it looks like 1, 2. One said they eat in classrooms, but they have supervision issues. Another said they eat in the cafeteria, but they can social distance in their cafeteria due to scheduling changes. Another one, let me see, 2 more said eating in satellite locations, additional lunch shifts. 9 through 12 can eat in any location in the school at one district. Again, supervision needs to be provided. And lastly, one district said, business as usual. We don't have the capacity to do anything. We're taking our chances.
Right. So there's probably ways to figure out how we mitigate and help that as we look at the upcoming months and next year, right? That's another thing I think we got to put high on our list because I don't know. And quarantines aren't going away with the vaccine. And then, yeah, yes, sir.
During our committee meeting, we absolutely did try to find solutions to a lot of these problems. But essentially, at the end of the 5-hour mark, at the second one, we realized that we had been there quite a long time. So if the transition to 100% is something that we fully adopt, we would have to do a similar meeting trying to finalize the solutions you're speaking of.
Yeah.
I mean, we did brainstorm such solutions. Eating in classrooms was one. Trying to phase in and phase out the different times that we're passing. I mean, not every solution is perfect, but we certainly did talk about them. So I don't want you to assume that we didn't discuss any of those points.
No,
we did. We just got to a point where we realized the parameters were to come up with a plan. We came up with the best solution, and that's what I came here to present.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid point, but I think you get to a greater point, which is that ongoing planning effort from a collaborative entity that represents multifacets of an opinion, and that ongoing effort to help inform how we're moving along. But really, when I I'm looking at Denise and giving her question marks like I did last time, because she helps me gather that information and feed me knowledge so I can help make a decision. So those are things that I have questions on, and not with the realization they can't be answered now. I would have much rather had us, this is me, guys, I would have much rather had us 3 days a week contact time. I think that would have allowed us some mitigation opportunity, but moved us forward in a more progressive manner. But I would be sitting here lying to you, with my conversations with Justin from our elementary school, and then some of our other representatives from the school district, and then some of the parents. I would be lying to you if I'm not truly conflicted either way. I want to see us help students, and I hear testimonies, and I was telling Justin this today, I hear testimonies that are so, it's not like I believe this person's lying to me. I believe them wholeheartedly that this is their true fear, concern, and value. But then I also have the complete 100% other spectrum. And so in my opinion, when I'm faced with two alternating perspectives rooted in such belief, I have to land in the middle. And for me, that middle was that additional contact day, 3 days a week, not 2.5. Okay, and that's just where I land. But I am grateful for the committee's work and the perception. But my issues with the next phase and transition is what are we mitigating, right? If we're going to limit ourselves to vaccination, then we're going to start with 3 days a week, then we'll use that data. Well, what are we mitigating with vaccine? Am I worried about quarantines? Or am I worried about quarantines and teacher safety? Or am I primarily focused on teacher safety? What are those things that are high value targets? Because if it comes down to quarantines and teacher safety, well, how can we structure the environment and promote quarantine classroom learning? And how do we speed that timeline up? What are those environmental factors we can change? And that's my task, and what I hope I portray to you guys is I'm still going to keep pushing the pedal to move us forward. I want to see us progress and have a strategy or an idea or data on, here's, if we're vaccinated, here's how we can get to 100% before the end of May, because this timeline is the end of May. Our seniors missed out on an entire year. I'm almost at the point I'd rather just have our seniors come back 100% of the time if they would like, but I hate that they're missing that opportunity. But then I also respect Dr. Grimm's opinion in terms of the risk and the perception, and so much that we don't understand. Does it sound like I'm undecided and I'm 50-50, right? I'm internally conflicted.
It's a very difficult situation, and I completely understand the parents' perspective. I do. But I also know that as an administrator in this district, it is my responsibility to look at all of our people, our students and our staff. My preference, Todd's preference, the preference of the teachers is that we have vaccinations first. And I realize that that is a long timeline, but the truth of the matter is the plan that was presented here could be implemented at any time. We do need time, however. We have schedule changes that have to take place, and that is going to take some time. Right. We have planning, such as the things that Justin mentioned, and that will take time. And so we can't feasibly make a change on a dime. We have to have some time to get some things in place. Our preference, again, would be that our staff are vaccinated so that they at least are protected. But this plan could be implemented at any moment.
So my last question is, and I mean, this is for my board and everyone else to consider, is I'm happy with the 2.5. I think it's a step forward. I'm grateful for that step, but I would like to see us consider, how do we do at least 3 days a week prior vaccine? What does that look like? What does that impact? How does that feel? And what is the timeline to do that? Is that after spring break? I don't think it's, because in my view, we're still providing, and maybe this needs to be explored further in depth with our committee, but we're still providing 2 days throughout that week where we're mitigating that exposure. And is there things we can do within that 100% day on Wednesday, if that's the modality and how you guys figure that out, that would mitigate some of your overall concerning risks? How do we progress and keep moving towards that. And I'm supportive of not 100% until our teachers are vaccinated. That's where I stand. I'm supportive of that. But I do think we can do more by adding instead of 2.53. But I do understand this is a transition. And in a month from now, you might bring me data that says this was stupid and it was a bad idea, right? Might completely change my paradigm. I don't know. But I do think we keep planning and making decisions and concepts about how do we get to that 3 days a week as the next progressive step. And I don't know if that's after spring break but that would be my hope that the board considers and thinks about as another progressive step. And the reason I bring that up and want to push your thought process that way is because as you're planning and making those adjustments for this type of adjustment and schedule change, that you can do it in a way that's conducive that would help you roll into something like that. And Denny, I swear I'm done talking.
Contemplating this over the last couple of weeks, I think the board, me included, has probably put our administrators in a poor position. They have to take the brunt of the parents, the brunt of the faculty, and this is a policy. This is a direction of the school. This isn't in the weeds. My opinion is this decision is a board level decision to give Todd the directive of which way to go. Sit back like we've been doing and just say, hey, Todd, make the best decision. It's not being fair to him. It's not being fair to the administration. I'm of the opinion that this board needs to make a definitive decision what we're going to do with school the rest of this year and say, Todd, go do it. That's just where I stand. I don't think we should put Todd or the rest of the administration in that position. That's our decision to make. That's my opinion.
I was going to hold off a little bit, but over the last couple of days, and I hope my bosses aren't watching, but I did wait until after work hours. I did wait till after work hours, but I have spoken with the 5 board presidents of the Northland schools for about a total of 4 hours between the 5 board presidents. There were some emails going around last weekend about how we were doing things and what we should be doing versus what others are doing. And to your comments just now about that we need to make, I'll just give you some notes that I took. North Kansas City board's very well informed of the process, but the superintendent's making final decisions. They work as a team, they follow the county guidelines. Superintendent takes most of the correspondence for student, faculty, and parent matters and has been very protective of the board. Kearney, school board president, superintendent responds to all correspondence. They defer to the administration for the plan and the process. Not pressing the issue at this time, they follow the updates from the CDC and the Clay County Health Department. Platte County board president, partnership with the superintendent. Platte County's board has probably been more aggressive than the others, but they've also been looking at dates since Thanksgiving about returning in person 100%. They've also canceled those dates 3 times. They do have a plan right now to go back March 1st to 100%. It is approved by the Platte County Health Board, but it is still not definite that they will make that March 1st goal. Safety is the key factor. And they did vote, but the only time they have voted was on the March 1st date. They did not take any votes, no motions, no nothing prior to that March 1st, because prior to that, they did not have the county grace to proceed with their plan. It is a partnership and not a demand. There have been no mandates, they were basically approving their March 1st plan provided by their administration. So they didn't set a mandate for the superintendent or the administration to follow that plan. Park Hill, they had a line drawn in the sand. I referred to this back at our session, our workshop, that Park Hills board president has continued to reiterate that their governance role versus an active administration decision-making role, and that they take the side that the board's responsibility is governance. And if we start setting policies, and this was, I'm not a quote, but I'm paraphrasing as close as possible. If we start setting policies on what parents want, we'll be changing our policies forever. They have decided to hold firm in their stance. They do get a lot of feedback, but it's not what we might think it is. Staff vaccinations are a major issue, and they're returning to 100%. They have over 2,000 staff members, and you compare that to our 3,000 staff and students. They have a huge, huge vaccination plan. But again, they're looking at the same thing we are as far as April for vaccinations. And this afternoon, I did talk with the school board president from Liberty, and they have been following on board policy, Clay County health orders, recommendations, and working hand in hand with the Clay County Health Department. They were very much involved with the Let Them Play Act last fall, because that was one of the primary spots where the, not protesters, but the vocal folks for the athletics Let Them Play showed up at one of the Liberty school board meetings. They have a resolution that I'm hoping that, if I haven't seen it yet, we can get a copy of. She said she thought it was from MSBA, but it's a student protection resolution. Their board reaches out to the state senators and representatives on a consistent basis. They do this proactively to make sure that all issues that they're facing, they don't wait till there's a problem. They are proactive with their communications with their representatives and their senators. Their philosophy is kids safe and teachers safe. There have been no board conversations about the vaccinations, so they have basically stated that they have given the superintendent the authority to make decisions within the CDC and school policy guidelines. Otherwise, if the superintendent goes outside of the CDC, the county, and the board policies that are currently set in place, he would at that point need board approval. So I think in those conversations, we're not doing anything differently than any of the other boards are in our 5 Northland neighbors. I heard it mentioned, and I've seen it on social media, about me shutting down a motion last month. You and I talked about it this afternoon. If anybody has a motion, you put the motion out there, it can go to a second if it gets a second, and after discussion, we'll vote on it. I'm not going to shut any motion down, but we did have a conversation and it was decided not to have a motion. So there was no motion put forward last month or at our workshop. So there was no suppression of emotion at the workshop.
Yeah, and honestly, it was the reflection from Denny, who he said, let's pause and take some time to gather some feedback from this committee and the input that I find value and I wanted to wait on, or else I would have put a motion forward. I'm not shy about that. But I think the point to where Scott's getting in, I'm unaware of an operating policy on how a school should be governed during COVID. I don't know what one looks like. I haven't seen one, and I respect how our other regional districts are operating. And Dr. Schutz, to be quite honest, I have full faith in you and your leadership team. I am trying to be as good of a stakeholder as I can to all entities that are commenting and trying to figure out just what the best way forward is. And I am truly conflicted. That's why I land in the middle. And I don't want people, and I've had this happen in the past, to be Ian wants 100%. Hear me now. I don't want 100% until we're vaccinated. When we're vaccinated, I want to go 100%. That's where I land. What I do want is 3 contact days a week. I look at that as still a hybrid schedule. I don't know if we've shared what that looks like with our LPHA, our local county public health department. I don't know if Clay County has that and what some of their reservations or concerns might be based on that. But I still think that is the best place to land to foster and support where everyone's trying to come in and add value and input. And that's why, honestly, that's why I land there. And I think, and Scott, you correct me if we're wrong, I think what Scott was really getting to is he would have much rather had a solidified vision for administration to work off of than a perception of an understanding that the board was able to either put into motion. And maybe I should have just put it into motion, didn't I? That might be my fault. But I found value, Scott, in taking the time to get feedback from this committee and understand that, to see if it would sway me either way. And to be honest, I'm at where I was 2 weeks ago. I still think that's the best way to move forward. But I also respect the plan you guys have put out in front of us, and I think it's a approachable plan for the time being. But I do think the additional conversation and when and how we get to at least 3 days, maybe to ride out the rest of the year if vaccines don't come or not. But that's the progression I would like to see. That's the takeaway I would like to leave. But I am only one person. I'm not the board. That's just my perception. And how do we help our administration understand what perception and where everyone's at on that? I don't know, without taking it to emotion.
I guess where I was kind of going with that was that even though I guess I said, possibly 2 days, I don't remember yesterday, let alone what was said 2 weeks ago. I'm sure somebody on Facebook can tell me what I said, or at least paraphrase it in their own words. That gets a little frustrating sometimes if you can't tell. But I guess what I was basically trying to say is we're not doing anything different. I think if we put a motion out there and we gave them a task, they took their experience and their knowledge and they came up with a plan. I guess all we have to do is say we don't like it, go back and do it again. But why are we asking them to come up with a plan if we already have the idea? If we already know if we have a minimum, I didn't realize we had a minimum a couple of weeks ago. We said, go forth, eliminate the virtual Wednesday, and do best what we can going forward around spring break. And
well, I mean, to your point, Denny, I don't know if we have a minimum. We don't have a collect. This is just Ian talking and swaying, right? I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't know if you guys all agree with me or not.
That's kind of what I'm saying, though, is we start taking motions and votes. The one thing that these 5 board presidents all had to say was that their boards are unified in the discussion. And I don't want to see us start dividing our board based on opinions. And I think right now we've got a lot of opinions out there, and that's who's right, who's wrong.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't think I disvalue an opinion just because you stand on a different side of the fence.
No, and you can't disvalue anybody's opinion. I've had somebody tell me that they thought we were friends. You know what? If we were only friends because I agreed with you, then maybe we weren't as good of friends as we thought we were. So, because I don't pick my friends based on who respects my opinion and who doesn't.
So here's what I would like to do, and then I'm going to put a motion, and then you guys can decide what you want to do with it. I would like to make a motion that we approve the concept established by the committee for 2.5 days a week, with the understanding that a plan will be generated by no later than after spring break on what a concept looks like to have 3 days of content time a week. That would be my motion.
I feel conflicted, and I lay awake at night thinking about this. On one hand, I want the kids to get back because we're ruining their year. But on the other hand, I don't want the school closed back down because of COVID. I feel disappointed, and I don't know why, because I know the committee has come up with the best solution. What I would have liked to seen at least 2 100% days per week, work back into it before the end of the year. If we go on vaccination and the way it's going, I don't foresee us getting vaccinated until May. The year will be over. This is a heavy weight on all of our shoulders.
Herein lies my point, and I don't disagree with what happened on the second, but even in this discussion here, the 7 of us don't have a consistent understanding or direction we want things to go. So how in the world can Todd and his team meet our expectations when we haven't as a group said, this is the expectation? We all have our opinion, and they're trying to match everybody's opinion. But since we all have a different of opinion in this group of 7, let alone our constituents out there, it makes it impossible for anybody to succeed with that. So that's where I go back that we as a board need to come together and say, this is the direction we would like to see things go, so that it's clear in that direction, that directive is crystal. Not this, oh, can I make it, can I not? Because we're just going to chase our tails. And I am more aggressive. I would like to see at least 2 contact times before spring break. I would like to see some of those things. I would like to see us back in school 100% before the end of the year. That's what I'd like to see. Following this particular plan isn't going to get us there. So I don't know if I want to second your motion because it's not aggressive enough for my desires.
I know.
But I have a question. I
And
know
you
I
don't-
haven't talked a whole lot tonight, so if I could have a moment, please. Question for you. I kind of feel like what they're saying is what you talked about. So we keep the every other day now, and then after spring break, we add a day in somehow, so where we have 100%. Is that not what we talked about?
No, he's saying you have to be vaccinated first. Their proposal to go 100% on Wednesdays after they're
Okay,
vaccinated
so get the vaccines first and then 100%.
on that Wednesday.
And then what is you're saying back then, just do it no matter what? I'm just trying to clarify because I get lost in everyone.
Yeah, so I'll be crystal clear. I want to see us have at least 3 contact days a week. I'm not going to tell you what that looks like or how it looks like. I think that input, I think you guys have a great step to get there. My hesitation is I don't want to wait on the vaccine piece of that. That's it.
Okay, so that's what, okay.
But you said earlier that you wanted all vaccinated first before.
For 100%, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 5 days a week.
Before 5 days a week. So
Correct.
1 day a week before vaccinations, or 2 days, whatever it may be, is one thing. But all week long is another thing.
Correct.
Before-
I think to be 5 days a week, 100% in attendance, we should have vaccines.
Okay.
But the alternate side is I feel like we could be a little more progressive and have 100% Wednesday. And I think it's a logical transition that you've already outlined in the time parameters to get there and using data. And maybe that needs to be pushed through the end of May so you can have a good data set on its impact. And then that might change my mind. But I mean, I'm confused if I put a motion out there. I don't think it will be seconded, which would be a waste of my time, but
Well, again, I'm not, and it's what I was trying to say a few weeks ago, I don't know exactly what we're putting a motion out. I mean, we can't develop a policy in one night. We can't develop a policy that says, hey, in 4 weeks, we're going to go back full time. That's not policy
my
to
motion
me.
would sound just like this. I would motion that we approve the steps presented tonight with a comprehensive plan to have 3 contact days a week at our next board meeting in March. In motion is exactly what it would sound like.
Okay. So from what I'm hearing, I mean, we're still 50-50. I think the board's 50-50, the community, the teachers are probably a lot less than that. But we're basically, from what I'm hearing from everyone tonight, we're having to choose between social and emotional needs of these kids and also the health and wellness of our community and teachers and the kids. I mean, so it's an impossible decision to make at this point. I don't know. I was hoping for fewer transitions, it did catch me by surprise when we did do the Monday, Wednesday, or the we took it away that quickly. That was surprising to me. To add another transition in, it's hard, but again, I'm of the feeling that we put the committee together to make this decision for me because I'm not in the schools every day. I'm not the administration, so I would trust the committee. So a motion, if I were to look at a motion, I would say, you know, I say we move forward with the committee's proposal as presented today. I know it's different than what Ian's proposal would be slightly. I mean, we got the
only
extra
difference-
day in there.
The only difference is I'm asking for a plan on to add what an additional day would look like.
Yeah,
I'm
and
not saying I want to approve a plan. I'm saying I want to see the plan.
See, and I don't know how that, and is that even possible? I don't
That would
know.
be the transition step. If you want 3 days a week, then that's already in the plan. It would be
Without the vaccine stipulation.
But like I said, that plan could work no matter when. So that's what it would be. It would be 2 hybrid days and 1 100% day, and that would equal 3 days per week per student. Also, I'd just like to point out the spring break is just 3 weeks away.
Also, I had one little piece of information. It's just, you had asked a question about Clay County and where they stand.
Yeah.
I just asked that again today. I've been asking that question since October, so the room knows, like, when can we come back? I mean, you can ask anybody that works in the cabinet with me. I've asked regularly, and just today they told me, no, they will not support that. So that's just their stance.
Can we be clear on come back? What does that mean?
Come back to 100%.
Right, and I'm
Come
not,
back face to face.
I'm not asking about 100%.
I think that Denise pointed that you presented the 2 hybrid days and 1 full attendance day. Correct?
I did not. I've talked about bringing kids back. I said our goal is to move towards coming back to 100%. So I didn't.
I don't believe they would support any day of 100% attendance. Whether it be 1 day in the week or 5 days.
But is that predicated off our current environment now, or what does that mean to them, and when is it acceptable? But I think Denise, I think it's an opportunity for great feedback. Right? I think we can ask that and say, again, what are those key indicators where you would accept that? That helps me.
I will continue to ask that question. I have another meeting with them Friday. I'll put that out. Like I said, I have asked, I have various correspondence, but I will ask that specific question, like break it down by the percentage of time in person.
There's another Clay County School District, sizable one, pushing much harder than what this conversation is with the county. So they're having these conversations.
The Clay County numbers, though, they're a percentage number based on the percentage of infection rate within the town. So as the town goes down, your numbers go down. And if they both go down equally, our numbers are going down, but we still remain in the red. So that is feasibly possible for us to have 1 case in the entire district and we're still in the red. It's actually statistically possible for us to have 0 and still be in the red, according to the way they're doing their numbers. So it's not necessarily the best gatekeeper when we come back. It's just not a good representation of when's a good time to come back.
It goes back to that, what are those key indicators from you guys and that perspective on when you start to maybe rapidly move us along? Because right now we have a very established set of plans based on a perception of our current environment and current circumstances. That environment and circumstance could change over time. Well, do we stay exactly where we're at, or do we be progressive and move along? I don't have a good handle on that. I don't think any of us, I think we're still trying to vet that out and figure out what that looks like. But those conversations will be pivotal as we look at next year's operations, because you're going to have quarantines next year. We'll run the risk of shutting fall sports down if we're 100% 5 days a week next year. And we still are.
Down now. We have entire teams.
Now exacerbate that by 5 days, 100%, right? You think fall football or fall sports wouldn't be subject to jeopardy based on quarantine guidelines? They still would be. So how do we structure ourselves to help, move us along? And so, I don't know. The best direction I can give is I still want to see us press along. I don't know if I just asked Dr. Streets, Michelle, maybe you guys can keep planning every month with a key group of stakeholders and come up with a plan on what that would look. I know we have a plan on what that would look like with the vaccine in place. Well, how would we mitigate some of the concerns if the vaccine wasn't in place? What would that impact be to the teachers? Would they not come to work? I mean, what are those cascading effects? And those are just continual conversations. And I don't know how to keep moving us along. And maybe I've done all that I can as a board to share my perspective and my wish for growth while trying to be respective of the risk mitigation that has to be in place for key safety aspects. And maybe I'm pushing too far. I don't know. That could be.
I think, one thing, I'm coming at this as a parent of middle school and high schooler too. So some people, saying, why aren't you thinking for the kids? Well, I am. My kids are part of it. But I think, my concern is the change that will have to happen with our kids and our teachers and our staff. Like somebody mentioned, maybe going to a transition tomorrow. My sons are finally used to doing the hybrid. Is it the best thing? No. I mean, they'll tell you, I'll tell you, it's not the best. Is it working for some kids? Yes. Would it be hard to change? My thought is, if we go back to 100%, are we going to change to the block schedule in high school? Are we going to have to go back and then throw a whole new wrench into our kids that have already got used to it, a hybrid, to the, what do you call it? All day, every class, every day schedule. And, the teachers, so, I mean, I'm tore that way. I'm tore like, for our band kids right now, they are not able to compete at all. We talk about our sports and they're able to compete. Well, our band kids aren't. And if we come back 100%, there's no way they can do anything. They can't even do their recordings of virtual things. And so I just think we all have to think about, do I want them to come back 100%? Yes. But I'm also thinking about the things it's going to affect if they come back more. And I'm with Ian. I'm very, concerned. I think I have to go with the staff, the group, Mr. Cochran and your group that put this together. I have to go with the recommendations that are being made by the staff that is in it. Does that mean I didn't review them and look at them? No, I reviewed them. I looked at all the data. I looked at all the stuff, but I have to go to the people that are actually doing the job right now and my kids. So sorry, I don't know if that doesn't help anything, but that's my thought.
Hold on, just please let me interject one thing. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Corcoran? Or can we excuse him and let him go home and be ready? See you tomorrow morning about 6:30.
Thank you, buddy.
Sorry,
We
Justin, I
appreciate it.
appreciate your time.
I was happy to share the committee findings. It was a tough process. There were a lot of opinions and there were a lot of but given the parameters that I tried to list earlier, this is what we believe to be the most effective strategy. And then if you said, what would the plan look like without vaccinations? I guarantee you we would bring you the same plan. I mean, we went through a lot of trial and error, and if 3 days a week were to be a thing, that's the way we would do it, I guarantee it. Now, if that is a step we would make, more planning would be required, as you alluded to. But I promise you the plan would be the same, because we were very comfortable and confident in that particular plan, so.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Justin. Please
And
appreciate
if we
it.
do have another committee meeting, I request that Todd Schutz continue to buy me dinner.
I'll tell you something that's been on my mind the past couple of days, and I really I don't have high hopes on the feasibility of this, and Michelle probably knows where I'm headed, and she probably wishes I wouldn't head there. But as we look at let's say the concept of the third day without the vaccinations. You know, and we've got, you know, 950 kids over here, for example, ish. Let's just talk about this school and the numbers of sections that Michelle showed pictures, you know, of those classrooms. You know, at any given section of the day, you know, during first period, let's say, how many sections are in the danger zone? There's just not enough room in that classroom. And where can we move them where they have more room? And then, so let's say that's 3 classrooms. Well, those 3 classrooms then go to the cafeteria and they spread out in that space. And then they have their class in the cafeteria where they can be 6 feet apart. You know, and then the second period, well, there's 6 classrooms in that group. That's a little bit more difficult. And by the way, they're starting lunch, so lunch is not an option. It may be almost impossible, but I think it's worth a look at the number of sections in each period that's over that limit, and is there anywhere else that class can go, or the PPE, which I don't have a lot of hope there either, unless we just encapsulate everyone in remember the movie The Boy in the Bubble, because you know those plexiglass, the virus can just go right up one side and fall right down the other. So, but that's something that I have not taken pencil to paper to. Again, I'm not telling you that I have great hope that's a possibility, but I also have not exhausted that.
In my spreadsheet, I can filter by block and tell you that pretty easily.
Getting back to where we were at
Sorry,
before.
Scott, go ahead.
We are going to continue to have this debate going around and around and around and around unless we put a stake in the ground. This virus isn't going away. This conversation, unless a stake's driven in the ground for how we are going to get kids back into their schools full time in spite of the virus, we're going to have this conversation next November. We're going to be having this conversation next February because it's not going to go away anytime soon. There's a vaccination, but look at your statistics on the vaccination. There are people contracting the virus with the vaccination. There are people that are contagious with the vaccination. The vaccine is not an end-all, cure-all, beat-all. So we have got to find a way to get our kids back in school. And just sitting there saying, we'll try one day and then we'll see what happens. Pushing this out is just kicking the can down the road, and we've been kicking this can all year long. At some point in time, we as a group, we as a society, we as a nation, we as humankind have got to figure out how we're going to move forward with life. And it's people in this room that are going to be making that decision. We either live in spite of the virus or we live in fear of the virus. And that's your only 2 choices. And I know that's a tough thing to say. And I know that's not going to make some people happy. But that's the reality of what life is today. Somebody comes up short in this argument. No matter how you slice this pie, somebody gets the short stick. And it sucks. But that's the reality of life today. Our job and what we have to decide is that person that's going to get the short end of the stick are students, our teachers, our parents. Who gets that short stick? We have said from the beginning that our decisions are made in the best interest of the students. And if that's going to ring true, then the best interest is getting them back in the classroom. It's a tough decision. It's not a popular decision, but that's the reality of life 2021.
One last thing, just on what and I'll mean one last thing to end the conversation, but we do have two of our state auditors waiting for their chance to speak as well. One thing Dr. Schutz mentioned a minute ago about that large Northland district, their plan is to go back 100% on March 22nd following spring break. Without Clay County approval, that will not happen. I mean, that was put to me as plain and simply as they could put it. That will not happen without the approval of Clay County. So,
I guess I find myself, Scott, I don't disagree that you got to put your foot in the ground, but I find myself to be a little more analytical than that. You know, my request in landing in the middle is not to kick the can down the road, but it's essentially to gather internal inherent data specific to our cohort and our community, instead of relying on interpretive data from other districts or throughout, which I think will better enrich our conversation. That's the reason I land there and don't say, let's go 100% now. Because my fear is if we went 100% now, irreflective of what everything's saying, and say it did have a negative impact, well, now we've exacerbated the amount of people exposed that could potentially receive that negative impact, when if we would have took a progressive step, reviewed data, and better understood that impact and what environmental changes we could affect to mitigate that impact, would drastically change our data. And that's the difference. It's our data. It's not Kearney's data. It's not Clay County data. It's not 64089 data. It is the district data. So the piece that's slowing me down is I want that analytical information, and I want to take time to be able to collect it. But to do that, you have to put a foot through the door and go that direction. And my foot through the door was just 0.5 more than what we're getting. That 100%.
I don't disagree with you. And I applaud that, and I can support that to a point. But the way it's presented today, we don't get there this calendar year. We don't get there this school year. And that's where I'm frustrated is, yeah, it's a step forward. Okay, what's the next step forward? What's the next step forward? This plan has us taking one step forward and sitting back and waiting until the end of the year. That's not good enough. In my opinion, that's not good enough. So I'm okay taking the first step forward, but it can't just stop there and we ride out the rest of the year at that, which is what the plan puts together.
Well, the teachers did talk about 2 weeks of data, or 4 weeks of data. I think
the teachers did talk about 4 weeks of data, and I appreciate that. I've not had a chance to visit with them further about that. It seems like a long time to wait to make an adjustment. So in my mind, I was thinking more like 2 weeks of data with that transitional move before moving on to the next step if the data looks good. So kind of on that note.
Yeah, my only disagreement is just it's the 3 days versus vaccination versus without making a progressive step with 3 days of hybrid, that Wednesday being 100%. That's the only difference in where I'm at. I think from there, as we get there, and Todd, maybe it's this step into that step in a month, and then based on that, who knows? But I think data received from that, Scott, will enlighten us, and it will either solidify our case to get back to 100% quicker, or it won't. So to me, it's a natural transition. That's my only, in terms of the entire proposal, that's my only discrepancy in terms of where I'd want to go. But you guys know that. I've said it, I don't know, 90 times now. Denny, I don't know what to do. What do we do? How do we move forward? Where do we go?
as I stated earlier, I think in the conversations that were had, we're just kind of, in uncharted waters. I'm not sure at this point if there was a motion on the table, if it was ever presented as a motion, or there was just kind of wordsmithing going on about what a motion would look like. You know, I listened to the other board presidents, and I'm not saying we have to follow that, but I'm just saying they were cautious in, once you take those steps forward, you don't want to go backwards. And I think the one that said they had a line drawn in the sand, you know, the line drawn in the sand is pretty easily smeared out, and another line can be drawn, but that's why they call it a line in the sand. It's not a line drawn in the concrete to where that's a permanent line. So, you know, if.
Well, can I ask a better question maybe?
Sure.
And then I swear I'm done. Dr. Schutz, I mean, we move forward with the plan presented tonight. Do I need to amend the motion to provide a directive to ask you guys to come up with a plan at our next board meeting of what it would be like to be 100% in time or in class on Wednesday? And and when I say plan, I know you have the structure of the plan, but what are the intricate details of accomplishing that? Right. So how would you get Wednesday 100% of kids back? And then what would that impact in that plan and that strategy look like? Do I need to set a motion, or is that something I can just rely on your guys' leadership to collaborate and bring forward at our next board meeting?
Yeah, I think so. If I understand.
And Todd, if you fundamentally disagree, that's okay too. It just helps me understand if I need to make a formal motion.
I think whether I disagree really is irrelevant in that what I understand you asking is to what would a third day look like, right? So if we had 2 hybrid days and we were charged with coming up with that third day, that third in-person day, which would have to be all in person, right? More than likely, without thinking too far outside my head and creativity. What would it look like? What would that day look like as safely as possible?
Right.
That I can work with, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to agree with it. It doesn't mean that you know, I think that's a fair request of your superintendent. You know, and I'm sure with that plan we would have some good solutions and then some that, you know, scared us a little bit. But at least you could see the safest way possible on that third day what it would look like. How about that?
That would be helpful.
I don't feel comfortable with the motion. I think this room is too divided to come up with.
I don't need a motion to do that.
Yeah. I think just asking them to come up with what it would look like is good enough and fair enough.
Will there be a good chance on that third day that students, we won't be able to honor some of those students who are virtual in their classes in? It was mentioned that students, we won't be able, that are 100% virtual or would become 100% virtual if we did go to 100% full-time in class. I don't know if that's for a day or if they wanted 5 days a week. Would we be able to honor their schedules in any part of the way like that?
The question on the survey was if we take any step toward 100% attendance. So the way I interpret that would be even 1 day a week, I would want my kid to go virtual. And so 75 said that they would want to go virtual. So we would need to provide those families an opportunity to identify themselves, and then we would need to work with the students to come up with a schedule. We would not be able to accommodate very many schedules. I'm talking a very small percentage, 100%, because we just don't offer all of the classes in a virtual environment.
You saw some noise when we made You saw some noise when we took away the virtual day, right? I mean, that for some people that was a big deal. Whether you got an email, whether you saw it on social media, that was a big deal. Well, it seems like a simple change, but when you run in a household, it's not always that simple. So the kind of things we're talking about, these will be big changes. There will be a lot of noise, and we will work very hard with kids and their families to do what is best for them. I think if we're making progress, I think the noise is worth it. It's worth the investment. It's worth the time, and the noise that it's going to create. But it's going to mess up some kids' schedules that we'll have to work through. Correct.
I can take the noise personally. I mean, I just don't want it to hurt my kids. Not my kids, you know, I mean, that's the thing is, yeah.
Well, and we need to look a little deeper at that too, right? Before any triggers are really pulled. I mean, if we've got, I don't know, I'm just throwing a number out there. If we've got 50 students that are in so many AP classes, and then it means they're in the middle of this AP class and they've paid, you know, for this course, and then we have no other solution for them. I mean, surely there's got to be some other solution back. So we will have to vet some of that as well.
That gets back to kind of that overall arching, what are those key indicators that you're going to measure, right? Is it letter grade, you know, during a transitional, like we're going through a transitional period, what are we actively going to monitor to see if it's beneficial or negative? I still don't have a clear idea what that is.
So the metrics that we were looking at were quarantines, and we would have to consider student and staff. Are we quarantining to the point where we can't function any longer? Are we quarantined to the point, like some of the middle school teachers pointed out, that if you have one kid per team that is COVID positive, we will quarantine half of the building. Now, the likelihood of that happening all at one time, but that's just an example. That would not be, we really wouldn't be able to function if half of our kids were in quarantine.
Right, and I think like that's a great example of taking the data prior to this transition and saying, you know, here's the average quarantines a week or a month. Well, here's its impact in 4-week period after we transition to 2.5.
And that's why having more than 2 weeks would probably be helpful. Maybe 3 weeks would be a good compromise. The other data that we would look at, the middle school has done some data analysis, and I asked the high school to do the same on the impact of quarantines on grades. There seems to be a much greater impact at the middle school level than at the high school. So 43% of the students who had Fs last semester were students who had been quarantined at the middle school. At the high school, it was just under 6%.
So there's going to be a correlation is what you're thinking, right? But
they're worried that maybe that will impact
putting
grades.
those guiding parameters in place and identifying them now so you can look at historical data compared to transitional data will help inform us of a transition step. And right now, we're all sitting here because, in my opinion, I don't have a comprehensive data set plan that says this was beneficial. Oh, hey, by the way, quarantine impacts were super low. It wasn't as scary as we thought, or it was super high and it wasn't as scary as we thought, right? Those will sway on how fast I move through a progression. And that's what if I say it over, that's the information I'm craving.
Well, and so those are the things that we would look at, but I don't know that we can set a mark of what number it would be until we get into it.
I don't think you can either because we don't know what we don't know.
And we may find when we get into it that there are other impacts that we hadn't considered that should be considered.
But I do think like we should try to grab whatever some key metrics are that we find valuable in terms of if it's risky or not for us, or if it's, you know, if we're starting to get data where we lose half of our staff in a 2-week period at the middle school, right? Well, that now becomes operationally infeasible, and well, how do you operate? It makes it a very easy decision. Well, we can't go 3 days a week, right? That helps me. Now, so that's the piece. I think that's the benefit of going to 2.5 that we're going to see. I think we'll get additional benefit from 3 by doing that because you're putting that 100% once a week in. I think we'll really start to see if it's as scary and as deep as the water as we imagine it to be or not.
Here's one thing with our next meeting being moved up to March 10th because of spring break, we would basically be 2.5 weeks into this next phase, eliminating the virtual Wednesday. So maybe we can, right up to the last minute, have the data that we can get. You know, it wouldn't be the full 3 weeks, but it would be all but 2 days of school that week there before spring break. And we can evaluate that at that point as far as how the extra in-person day, you know, it's still just a half day on the average, but that additional for 2.5 weeks. What has that done? Has that changed, had an impact on our numbers or anything else? So did you have something, Wade? Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, I was just thinking, and that's the case. If it does look like we don't want to do it, then we're just changing the schedule for a third time then on our students. I mean, it's either kind of like what Scott was saying, either do it or don't do it at all, and just stick with it, or else we're just keep changing on the students and the kids, or sorry, students and the teachers. And I don't know, I'm still good with this plan. I mean, I've said it in many meetings before. I'm still good with waiting until teachers are vaccinated. I like taking the slow route, kind of like you're talking about, get all our information, get all our data, reassess as we need to. I mean, if we would have just jumped into it several months ago, we'd be like Platte City, we'd be 100%.
One thing, Scott, I'll let you have it. There is this Northland school out there with a plan to go back 100% right now. And I was reminded just a few minutes ago that plan's going to have to be approved or denied by the county before March 22nd, when they come back from spring break. If that's their target date, they'll have to know a week or two in advance of that. So we're going to know here real fast what Clay County is going to do with that request.
And that will
At that
help.
point, huh?
That will help enrich the conversation.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, if we're looking at following Clay County guidelines and they say that, I appreciate that text message I got, but they're not going to wait until the 22nd to approve that plan. They're already, working on it. That plan's been presented, whether that's going to be approved or denied. So that'll have us, we'll know by March 10th for sure whether they're going back 100% or not.
Which begs the question, Dr. Cradfield, has this plan concept been approved by the Clay County Health?
Have you mentioned it to them?
I have mentioned some of these concepts, but not to the point where asking him if he would approve them.
Sorry, go ahead.
One of the things I think if we sit back and listen to the conversation, it's really got me uneasy, is we don't have a plan to go back. We've talked about it tonight, so we have to look into what it would take for the locker rooms, what it's going to take for cafeteria. Well, if we're going to go back full-time 100%, what's that going to look like? It's going to change the schedule. These are the things that are going to have to happen. These are what we're going to have to change in the classroom. So we're going to have to change with the students. If Clay County says, yeah, go ahead, all those plans have to be put into place before we can pull the trigger. Those plans needed to be developed and ready to go at a moment's notice so that we can get this ball rolling. And unless we start putting some target dates out, and they don't have to be hard drawn in the sand, but they have to be some targets. Unless we have some targets we're shooting for, we just sit back and say, yeah, those plans got to be made. Yeah, those plans, we got to do that. Yeah, that plan's got to be made. We still need to do that. We need to have those plans in place so as soon as we are capable, whether it be for some gating criteria that we come up with, whether it be what the Clay County Health Department says, whether it's something we decide ourselves, that has to be in place so that we can move forward expediently. Otherwise, we're just going to be sitting, waiting around to develop a plan to get this ball rolling in motion. That's something we've had a year now to figure out what those plans are. We just seem to be behind the eight ball.
I understood that to be the direction for the next board meeting, that you want specifics of what it would look like, some of those daily details.
And he's asking for the next board meeting just for the extra Wednesdays.
The 100%.
But let's get to the next board meeting and Clay County says, hey, yeah, we can go. What's our plan? How do we follow suit? How do we get on those heels and move forward along those lines? How do we get back 2 days, 2 full days? And those plans are what we need. And those plans are what I was kind of hoping we would have by now. And it doesn't appear as if they're there. And so when we get the green light to go, we're going to be stumbling for a couple of weeks figuring out the plan to go.
I don't believe so. If that's the direction that you want for the next board meeting, then we can have those plans in place. And regardless of how many days you add 100%, the plan would be the same. Once we get those details worked out, it'll be the same detail for every day that the students are 100% in attendance. Including, I think that we need to reach out to the, and, you know, put our feelers out for who is wanting to move to virtual if we do move to 100%, so we can start looking at those schedules and making plans for the students.
When you say 100% Wednesdays or five days?
Again, the question to parents was, if we make any move toward 100%, what do you want? And there were 75 parents who responded that they want their kids to go
Yeah,
virtual.
but I think the devil's in the detail. When you say make any move to 100%, they're saying we're going back 100% 5 days a week. That's very different than 100% 1 day a week.
Well, preceding that question was an example, the example that we had provided to you guys at your board meeting, that a transition step would be adding, so that we had 3 days of contact within a week. So if they read the whole question, but we can be very specific in
That's
the
my
information
point
that's
is
provided.
we
That
need-
the board is considering this, and it might look like this. And if this is what happens, we need to know if you guys want to be virtual in that scenario, so that we can start planning for it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just, when I answered and read that question as a parent, it comes off as moving to 100%. I mean, even with the preceding information above it. Now, you see the transition step that you guys have outlined, but it just says moving to 100%. And that was my struggle, is I missed the opportunity to gain insight. And maybe I'm thinking of a different question. Maybe it's not related to the virtual question. But I see where you're going, and I think there's value input, but I want the specific input. Is a parent as concerned about 1 day 100% a week as versus 5 days 100% a week?
Well, we're gonna find out.
That's
Well,
valuable to me.
If I can interrupt for a minute, I think we're getting into the weeds. I think we're getting into micromanaging. I think we gave them a task of coming up with a plan. I don't think it's our job to decide who's going to eat cafeteria, who's going to have science in the lab, who's going to sit in the hallway during lunchtime. I think they did what we asked them to do. I don't think I need them to come back in 2 weeks and tell me exactly where everyone's going to be, especially since, you know, Clay County may say no anyway. But I mean, I'm sure they're going to have a plan. If they know, we tell them that, you know, we want the kids back at 100% eventually, they're going to have to come up with a plan. They're not going to wait until the last day to figure it out. So again, I don't think it's our job to micromanage every little detail. And personally, I don't want to sit here until 10:25, especially when we still get to listen to our auditors.
Well,
So I think we need
I
to move
agree
this
with Sarah.
conversation
We're not
along.
getting anything solved.
No, we need to move this along. I'm
Well,
getting
but see,
tired.
what you just did is contradicted the direction that we were hoping, that I just asked Todd and Michelle. So do you not want to see a plan on what it would look like to be 100% in
I
Wednesday?
have no interest to micromanage them. If we tell them we want them back in 5 days a week, when the Clay County says we can do it, then I say, let's do it. I trust that they will get it done. I'm not going to tell them how to do it, and I'm not going to approve their plan because that's not my job. But I'm getting tired and cranky, so.
I agree. We just need to know there is a plan, and go from there. I mean,
but do you?
I trust them to come up with it.
So do I, but do we want to see a plan of what it would look like?
Yeah, but I'm not going to approve it or not approve it. I trust that they're going to have the plan.
I think they'll have a plan.
that's my thought. I don't know how to approve it or not approve it. I'm not doing it.
And I don't think, is there anything to approve?
No.
Let's simplify this. We're not micromanaging anything. We have requested that something be brought to present to us on what it would look like if we went 100% on Wednesday. What it would look like, not how it would be managed, how we would tell it to be managed. Correct. But just the distinctions in the conversations gets back to my point of, yeah, how do you give them clear direction? We just gave them 4 different opinions in the matter of 20 minutes yet again. I think you guys have what we want.
What you just said is what I've been running with here in my head for the last 20 minutes. So can we just go with that?
We can, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not trying to close the conversation, but I want to thank all of you. The emotions that go through your head during this conversation
Thank you, Randy. Living with this pandemic and trying to run a school district is, I just can't even, I can't describe it to you. It's just horrible. It's just very, very, very challenging. But I appreciate the attitude that you bring into this boardroom and how seriously you take your roles and how seriously you take your duties. Scott, when you say, let's just give Todd and his team direction, that sounds good. This sounds really good. Just fix this for me. Tell me where to go, what to do. So we're working very, very hard for you, but more importantly, working very, very hard for our students. We take this very, very seriously. And we take the safety of our staff, obviously, very, very seriously. I can't reiterate enough what I said at the last meeting, that I desperately want our staff vaccinated before we bring in our 100% population. But we will bring you what that third day looks like, what it could look like, and we will do that on the safest way possible, and we can go from there. Fair enough, Mr. President?
The last thing I want to say is for anybody listening to this or that will watch it going forward, or anybody that says this group doesn't care about the kids of this district, you haven't listened to this conversation tonight. And I just want to thank everybody for their input. And you can tell that it comes from here just as much as it comes from here, because that's what this is all about, is the kids in this school district. So thank you. Any other discussion before we move on? I'm not going to shut it off. If somebody has something they want to say before we move on, we'll say it. Okay, thank you. Donna, proceed, please. I believe we're going into 12.0, our new business. And 12.1 was the state audit.
Yeah. This is our state audit conversation. We do have Amanda Flanagan. She's waving at us now. Julie Molden is on here somewhere, or she was. Did we run her off? There she is. So Amanda and Julie are working with Mr. Kruger in coordinating our audit. I believe this is week 3, is it not, ladies? 3rd week on the job?
Yes, that is correct.
Right, very good. So I'm going to turn it over to you. It's good to see you in person, so to speak. And this is our board, and you've seen them in action. So we'll give the floor to you.
Okay, well, we appreciate you taking a few minutes for us. Like Dr. Shute said, we started about 3 weeks ago, and it'll probably last about 3 or 4 months. But the purpose of tonight is just to introduce ourselves, kind of go over what our audit process is, and then answer any questions you guys have. All right, so as you know, we were petitioned under section 29.230.2 of the revised Missouri statutes to do the audit. 750 signatures were required. 907 valid signatures were received, so way more than the minimum needed. So let's see here, we've got for you here. So Dr. Schutz has already signed the engagement letter. So our estimated cost for the audit is $45,000 to $65,000, and the district is responsible for paying that. It will be billed once the audit is complete, once the report is issued. So there's no interim billings or anything like that. It's 100% after the audit is completely done. And the estimate, like I said, it's an estimate. So we will bill you the actual cost of the audit, even if that exceeds the estimate, the upper end of the estimate of $65,000. If we are going to exceed our estimate, we will let you know in advance. We won't just spring it on you. Okay, so right now we're doing what we call survey work. We're asking just some general questions about how the district works. We're trying to decide what work we're going to do. Right now, we're taking into consideration any concerns we receive from the public, and we're going to be issuing a public notice that our audit has started, and it'll have the hotline information on it, so people can feel free to bring us their concerns. And now those are all confidential. It's a whistleblower hotline. I'll give you that information here in a minute, so the public has it. But that'll be in the public announcement as well. It'll go out, the news release. Our work will take about 3 months, 4 months, and then we have a pretty extensive report process. It usually takes us about 3 or 4 months to get through our report review. And that's because our reports are public and we like them to be mistake-free. So after we draft the report, after we do all this work and we draft the report, we will come to the board with a draft, and that draft is confidential. Any documentation that we get from the district up until the report is public is confidential. We can't share that with anybody outside of the district. All in all, I would expect the whole audit process to take 6 to 10 months. It can be kind of a lengthy process, but like I said, we want to make sure that the report that we issue is correct. And I will tell you, so far we have received really excellent cooperation from the district. Mr. Kruger has been great so far. He's gotten everything to Amanda as she's asked for it pretty quickly. We've been very pleased with how fast we've been getting things. So I thank you for that, Mr. Kruger. Okay, so our audit is going to cover the school year 2019-2020, which is fiscal year starting July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020. We will also be looking at the current period. So it'll go all the way, we will look at current expenditures, current procedures, all those kinds of things. We're not going to exclude the current period. And we can look at things older than back a year if we want. It's our discretion to do that or not. All right, so all of our audits are done in accordance with government auditing standards. And you guys should be familiar with those with your financial statement auditors, but the standards for petition or for performance audits are different than for what you're used to, the financial statement audits. So it's a little different, but similar. So our objectives are going to be evaluate the district's internal controls, evaluate your compliance with certain legal provisions like DESI reporting and Sunshine Law. And we'll also evaluate certain management practices and procedures. So we'll look at bidding, purchasing, attendance, those kinds of things, reporting. But like I said, this is not a financial statement audit. We'll look at some financial information, bank recs, deposit records, that kind of thing, but it's not a financial audit. All right, so what else things you guys can expect? So like I said, we're going to look at the public's concerns, but as I was explaining to Mr. Kruger, we can't share those with you. Those are confidential and they're protected by state law. So we'll look into them, but you may be able to tell what some of them are, you may not. If anything that we find that is significant will be in our report. And so any of the concerns that we receive, those people that give us those concerns, they won't know what we found until the report is public. So if they have a concern about something and it's not in the report, they're never going to know what we found, what we saw, what we didn't see. That's confidential. The only thing the public will know is what's in the report, the final report. So what do we look at? We do a lot of the things that financial statement auditors do. We'll interview staff, we look at records, we'll test some transactions. But we're pretty thorough. We go pretty in depth on the areas that we choose to look at. Okay, so if you have any concerns throughout the audit and you want to keep those confidential, or if the public does, we have a hotline that anybody can call with those concerns. It is 1-800-347-8597, or they can be emailed to us at moaudit@auditor.mo.gov. we'd like to get those concerns as fast as we can so we can plan our work. Sooner we can plan our work, the sooner we can dive in and find some things that hopefully will help you guys do your jobs better. Obviously with COVID and all that, we're trying to do as much of our work remotely as we can. That protects us and the staff at the district. We will probably plan a couple on-site visits, count cash, just we like to look at fixed assets, do some, and we'll do some testing there, but we'll try to keep that to a minimum. Let's see, what else? Let's see if I have anything else on my list here. Amanda, can you think of anything I've forgotten? No? Well, good, that's good. Okay, I think that's all I've got. I'll open up now to questions if you guys have any questions, concerns about how the audit works.
First thing I want to say is thank you for your patience tonight, and sorry for keeping you for the last 3.5 hours before we got to your part of the agenda.
No problem. As you can imagine, I have been to some lengthy meetings before.
Does anybody have any questions for Julie or Amanda?
Can I ask? I'll ask a question. I know Squeaky Wheels, they have been concerned about, well, the reason why they did this is because we were $1 million in debt, which I know that's not worded correctly. But this is a performance audit. So with their basis of getting this audit going, are we going to be able to answer their questions?
I won't be able to, I can't really answer that. Like I said, their concerns are confidential. And we have full discretion as to what we look at and what we don't. So what we're doing right now, like I said, is survey work, and we're trying to decide what we think are the significant risks, the areas of the district that we think are going to be most worth your time and ours to look at, where we think we can give you the most value, where we can give you recommendations in areas that will help you. Well, hopefully those will alleviate some of the petitioners' concerns. But when we bring out the report, if we don't address all those things, then I would think that you as a board would want to come out with some additional information, maybe to alleviate some of those concerns that that the public has. But our report won't necessarily address all those.
Any other comments or questions for Julie or Amanda? Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Just real quick, if you guys have any questions or concerns, just anytime throughout the audit, Dr. Schutz and Mr. Kruger have our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 12.2. Moving forward on the agenda. I lost my screens. SIPGKC supplemental payment. Mr. Kruger.
We put this in the board packet for you as a new business action item, but basically we've been updating you on a monthly basis on the financials of the SIPGKC. The recommendation before you, and I'll answer any questions that you have, is basically to approve a supplemental payment of $200,000 based on our current loss ratio, and to help get us back to closer to even. So that's the recommendation, is to approve a $200,000 supplemental payment. As you can see, we currently again have a loss ratio of 545,000. We are operating till June 30th. Based on our claims and our premiums that are being remitted, there is a possibility that again, we will work back towards being whole. Anything that is paid to this account should there be a surplus, again, that as pointed out earlier to Ian, that remains in our account. It's not lost and we have access to that. Again, if we are short though, we will be required on June 30th to make an additional supplemental payment. We have had several, we've got one claim that has been deemed catastrophic. We have a stop loss limit of $275,000. We currently have a claim that has exceeded that. We've got some other claims, actually 18 claims that this year have hit the six-figure number. The insurance is there as a benefit. It's a blessing that it's there and very much appreciated that it's there. We've just had some really bad luck this year. You know, you under no circumstance would, you know, ever wish that somebody would have to get a transplant or have cancer or have a serious critical illness or accident. But those things have all happened and we're paying for it.
Mr. Kruger, this 200,000 payment that you're supplemental payment that you're talking about was accounted for in your presentation earlier tonight on the FY21 budget, correct?
Correct. In the working copy, it will be included in the budget revision that you'll see later in the spring.
I guess what I was asking was the projected end FY21, beginning of FY22, that was baked into those numbers and calculations.
Correct. On my working copy, that is correct. And the presentation tonight reflected that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Kruger?
Yeah, Wayne, are any of our ongoing claims going to require us to come back at the end of the year and make another balloon payment?
Yes, it's possible. Yes. So for example, we've got, you know, some cancers, ongoing cancer treatments. We've got some claims without going into too much detail because we're small enough. If I go into too much detail, it'll give them away, but I want to protect those folks. But it's, yes, it's possible, but it's also equally possible that we won't.
Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, this is an action item. We'll accept a motion and a second to proceed with the supplemental payment to the SIPG KC medical benefits in the amount of $200,000.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the supplemental payment to the insurance in the amount of $200,000. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 12.3, 2021-2022 calendar recommendation.
Thank you. As I mentioned in previous board meetings, the AFC calendar subcommittee and the salary and benefits committee worked together this year to draft the calendar in hopes of finding some benefits for our staff in that calendar. Two drafts were created based upon the advice of that large group and then submitted to the staff for opinions. And the AFC is recommending one with a slight change in it. to you for your consideration for next year. And so just some highlights of this calendar. We have to have 1,104 hours of student instruction time in order to accommodate the forgiveness of snow days, which is built into this calendar. It is that's the same process that we looked at last year, and had we started school in August like we were supposed to, that's how we would have addressed our inclement weather days this year. The staff asked for 2 additional days off at Christmas break to give 2 full weeks. That amount of time was compensated for by adding 5 minutes of student instruction time at the elementary level. The middle school and high schools already had enough instruction time to accommodate those 2 additional days. And then they have requested for a long time, actually, a work day when they come back from Christmas. So there'd be no students that day, to allow them to prepare for second semester, excuse me. And those hours were recaptured by eliminating the early release days at the end of first, second, and third quarter. So that added 7.5 hours that could go into that total of 1,104 for student instruction time. And so those are the major changes to this calendar. Otherwise, it's very similar to what you've seen in the past. It has 172 days of student attendance, 182 days for teacher attendance, and again, features 2 full weeks at Christmas, which we did not have this year, and a work day for staff when they come back. So I will entertain any questions that you may have.
Comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, I will accept a motion and a second to approve the 2021-2022 calendar recommendation as presented.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second to approve the 2021-2022 calendar recommendation as presented. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 12.4 personnel report.
Yeah, you have the report. We can answer any questions you may have, but we recommend you approve the report.
The only question I have, Donna, is 12.5 going to be the additional agenda item to approve the contracts for the administration? Okay. I didn't know if we had this 12.4 subdivided or if we just added an agenda item. We reviewed the personnel report in executive session. I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the personnel report as presented.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the personnel report. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes. 12.5, administrator contract renewals.
Same thing here.
We looked at that in executive session and decided that this needed to also be approved in public session. Any comments or questions? I'll accept a motion in a second to approve the administrator contract renewals as presented.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the administrator contract renewals. Any further discussion? Please vote. Does that take us to 13, our correspondence, or no, 12.6, our MSBA 2021 Governance Team Award?
Yeah, I just plugged this in here. You all got this email. Didn't know if the board wanted to consider what might need to be done to achieve such an award, or if the board even had any interest in this.
I don't think we qualify. The master.
Okay.
When you're close, aren't you? There's one additional board member chooses advanced, only one of the master.
I think you should get it right before you walk.
I could probably get it in a couple.
I don't know.
I think it's an ongoing,
Says the register for this site is spring of 2021. So you got two, 3 months. I don't know if they have a.
Wade's going for it.
The summit's in June 18th, so I imagine registration probably doesn't run long with.
we've got our meeting next Tuesday about our board evaluation. This might not be a bad time to kind of discuss where people stand. I
Good
know me
idea.
personally, I'm just reading the book. I've got the hours. I just need to read the book and do the book report for the advanced. Sarah believes the same way as far as progressing. There were a lot of MSBA just here a couple of weeks ago. A lot of different that were continuing education hours. Your hours would be, put towards the advanced, it's not degree, but the advanced category certification, yes. So I think if, everybody, that should be, if you log into MSBA, they will have where you stand as far as your progression. And if you guys want to have a discussion about that on that night, we can, as far as the board self-evaluation. And if we don't make it by April of this year, they do this every year. And I think the reason they sent it out was because we do have several people that are close to getting to that advanced level. And like Lynn said, he was working on the master's level. So, and it's just a matter of accumulating the hours. Okay. Was that the end of, I hate not seeing the agenda. Miscellaneous 13.1.
Yeah, I'll go in reverse order here. You've already talked about the board self-evaluation. Listening tour for Maple, I would say that's the last one. We were supposed to have had the middle school one today, and that was canceled due to snow day. Teacher schedules are a little different, so we'll need to reschedule the middle school. Michelle and I did do a video answering the questions that they already had for us. So we answered those and put it out to the middle school, but we'll get something else scheduled with them. We'll let you know when that is. And then a reminder, the next 2 meetings will be a week early. It'll be the second Wednesday. And then finally, cooperating school districts of Greater Kansas City hosted a legislative meeting on the 28th. Several of you were able to attend. I wanted to give you just a second to share any insights or thoughts you might have from that meeting.
For me, I guess as a new board member and just as a parent and everything, it was scary. There is a lot of legislation that's bombarding this year against public schools. A lot of legislation with charter schools, with voucher systems, with moving school board elections to November, and then with being able to recall school board members. So for me, it was enlightening and has opened up my eyes and doing more legislative, contacting people and being more open to it.
It was nice to have, they had different representatives and senators, and they had state school board members on the call. That kind of talked about their position on several things. Hurlbert, our newly elected representative, was on the call. He sounded pretty indecisive to me. I don't know if you guys all understood it the same way. Senator Hegeman, I don't know how to say his name, Hegeman. He wasn't on the call. I think he was supposed to be, but he was not on the call. And I would have really liked to hear his comments because from what I understand, he was undecided also on this bill. The cooperating school district, part of our budget is legislation. We do have a lobbyist that we pay for to go down and meet with these senators. I mean, obviously, we don't have the time to do it or the knowledge to get down there and do it every week. So we do pay someone to do that. And he was very informative on how he does it, his process, his relationships with the members. He did a great job there was some question and answer time. I couldn't hear the questions for some reason from the audience, but I could hear the legislators, which is strange. But anyway, it was a good meeting. I appreciate all the work that we are doing. We have 32 member districts. St. Joe just joined. Announced that night, so that was nice. So I mean, it's nice to collaborate with the other districts around us.
They've tried to push this this charter school thing for many years, I think. But now they've gotten smart and they've got that all worked together into one bill. House Bill 55.
Yeah, Senate Bill 55. I'm not sure
Yeah.
how smart that is though, because
Yeah.
you only have to disagree with one
And one
part
of
of
the
it to
things,
sink the whole thing, right, Wade?
I talked to Josh, what's his name? And I told him, we're both politicians, you know as well as I do, that this week 6 people love you, 6 people hate you.
Yeah.
And next week they'll switch sides, and all that is trying to get, if they don't like how you vote, they'll get someone in there to vote. He agreed with me. But they've gotten pretty smart at it, about tacking all that stuff all together. So it's kind of scary. They're really working hard on it.
Anybody else?
But also, the legislative days in April, wasn't February last year, it's in April this year. I'm registered for it. If you want a chance to go talk to your congressman, sign up for that.
We need to be careful though when we've got, when we talk, we don't want
to, what was I just? Politics. We don't want to talk politics. We can give information. We can't talk politics.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to call and contact those guys and have a call. I went down the list and made those phone calls myself and didn't actually get to talk to anyone in particular. I got to talk to their aides, but give your opinion. It's important. It's just a quick 30-second phone call, but I'd encourage you all to do the same.
Yeah, thank you for that, Scott. That they really, we are told by lobbyists in general that you are elected officials in your capacity here, and they are elected officials at the state level. And, you know, they know where superintendents stand on, you know, charter school expansion, you know. They know where superintendents stand on, you know, tax, you know, this, that, and the other thing. But to hear from you guys means a lot. So thank you for the time that you take to do that. Very, very much appreciated, and a great way to serve the kids and families of this community. That's all I have, unless you have anything else for me.
Any further discussions? It's 11 o'clock. If not, I'll accept a motion and a second to adjourn. Got a motion and a second. Please vote.
It's been a long time since you had a meeting that late.
I don't want to say.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Sorry to keep everybody so late.
Yes.